We have structured this platform around 3 building blocks: human capital development that we will discuss today, global and regional value chains and the opportunity that represent continental integration, and infrastructure and connectivity that we will discuss tomorrow. I would like to welcome esteemed panelists and participants. And before starting the opening session, allow me to recall a few technical items that we already are familiar with, but we need to emphasize. La réunion sera enregistrée. L'interprétation sera disponible en anglais et en français. L'audience sera invitée à envoyer des questions dans la fonction questions-réponses du Zoom tout au long de la session. Le modérateur y reviendra pour la séance dédiée aux questions-réponses. Et nous allons regarder un bref vidéo concernant l'interprétation.
Bienvenue à cette réunion virtuelle OCDE. Merci de bien vouloir utiliser un casque USB filaire doté d'un micro. Le Bluetooth est déconseillé car cela peut nuire à la qualité de votre son. Lorsque vous n'intervenez pas, merci de bien vouloir désactiver votre micro en appuyant sur le bouton Mute situé en bas à gauche de l'application Zoom. Si votre micro n'est pas désactivé, cela risque de créer un écho ou du larsen pour les autres participants. Pour les réunions avec interprétation, si vous écoutez un canal d'interprétation et que vous souhaitez prendre la parole, merci de bien vouloir sélectionner Off dans la fonction interprétation de Zoom avant de vous exprimer. Une fois que votre intervention est terminée, vous pourrez à nouveau sélectionner le canal d'interprétation. Si vous avez un texte pour votre discours, merci de bien vouloir l'envoyer à l'adresse suivante: document.interprète@oecd.org. Si vous rencontrez des difficultés techniques, vous pouvez utiliser la fonction chat de Zoom afin de contacter le host ou co-host de la réunion ou bien envoyer un mail à l'adresse suivante: conférence.support@oecd.org. Merci de votre attention et de votre coopération.
Welcome to this OECD virtual meeting. Make sure you use a tethered USB headset with a microphone. Please avoid using Bluetooth devices as they may impair your sound quality. Unless you are taking the floor to intervene, please make sure you press the mute button, which is located in the lower left corner of the Zoom application. Failing to do so may cause echo or feedback for other participants. For meetings where there is interpretation, if you are listening to an interpretation channel and you wish to take the floor, it is essential to select Off on the Zoom interpreting function before doing so. Once you are finished, you can switch back to the interpretation channel. Should you have a prepared text of your speech or any written notes, please send it to the following address: documents.interprete@oecd.org. Should you encounter technical difficulties, you may use the Zoom chat function to contact the meeting host or co-host, or send an email to the following address: conference.support@oecd.org. Thank you for your attention and cooperation.
Thank you. Allow me now to introduce our distinguished panelists in the opening segment. His Excellency Manuel Escudero. Ambassador Escudero is the chair of the governing board of the OECD Development Center and permanent representative of Spain to the OECD. Querido embajador, la palabra es tuya.
Thank you, Luis, very much for the organization of this important meeting. I understand that still Commissioner Muchanga is not with us, so anyway, my salutation in advance.
I'm there.
Oh,
I'm around.
Hello, Commissioner. And dear Director too of the OECD Development Center, Mario Piccini, and distinguished panelists, participants, and friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all in this official launch of the African Union OECD Development Center platform on investment and productive transformation in Africa. This meeting cannot be more opportune and timely. It takes place right after a highly successful economic forum on Africa yesterday, where we gather many ideas on what is necessary to promote better and more coordinated investment for Africa's recovery. Today and tomorrow, we will delve into some of those ideas and many others, and identify concrete steps to make them happen. Yes, I would like to express here the wish to ground the inspired dialogue we are going to have today and that we had yesterday into specific, concrete proposals. As we say in Spanish, sin prisa pero sin pausa, with no hurry, but without pause, because Africa deserves new and great opportunities. So let's try to narrow down our dialogue into specific proposals, if not in the meeting today, in the meetings that will follow in the future. In these introductory remarks, I would like to stress 3 points. First, why this platform now? Second, where are we coming from? And third, where do we aim to go? So why this platform now? Let me start by the reason why we are launching this platform on investment and productive transformation with the African Union now. The COVID-19 crisis is taking a heavy toll. We know that. The continent's GDP has contracted by 2.6%, and 41 countries, 41, have entered in recession in 2020. And the crisis threatens to reverse the development progress of the past 2 decades. The crisis is also exposing vulnerabilities that have hampered a stronger and more inclusive development. So let us not forget that the growth observed before the crisis has not delivered enough quality jobs for African people. In the current context, the mobilization of investment is even more important to avoid the risk of Africa's divergence. The continent cannot miss the boat of the recovery. Governments and central banks around the world have launched huge fiscal and monetary stimulus packages. Still, only a minimal share of these trillions is going to finance Africa's recovery. So we are here confronted with 2 paradoxes. First, the cost of borrowing has rarely been so low. And second, Africa's youth population and its abundant resources offer potentially higher rates of return for investors. But still, capital markets put a hefty risk premium on African borrowers, and very little equity investment is supporting the dynamic ecosystem of African startups and entrepreneurs. Dear friends, it is urgent, and it is in the interest of both African and OECD countries to address these paradoxes so that more investment can finance Africa's transformation. At the same time, quality and not only quantity matters. It is important to mobilize investment that creates good jobs and addresses Africa's vulnerabilities. So how to make this happen? Yesterday, we heard that African governments should implement strategies that foster the development of African enterprises and job creation in high productivity sectors. As Tidjane Thiam said yesterday, foreign investors will not flow to Africa if they don't see a thriving African domestic productive sector. In particular, productivity must increase faster. Africa's productivity has declined compared to Asia's. In 2018, labor productivity stood at 50% of Asia's level, and it stood at 67% in 2000. Raising productivity calls for investment in human capital, access to services, and technology. We also heard that investors need to better understand the opportunities that the continent offers, but that the risk of coordination failure are high. Ibrahim Mayaki recalled us the importance of institution building and policy complementarity, and that the private sector rarely invests in early stage project preparation. Development partners, and we mean here all the public and private agents that operate in Africa, from China, Japan, Korea, USA, or Europe, and African governments, should work together to build these capacities and tackle some key obstacles preventing investors from realizing those opportunities. This is particularly relevant for infrastructure and connectivity projects. These are the reasons why the African Union Commission and the Development Center of the OECD have decided to join hands and launch this platform. We aim to bring together the knowledge and expertise of African players and their partners to support Africa's agenda. So my second point, where are we coming from? Allow me now to turn my second point to this point and briefly recall the background and objectives of this platform. The idea goes back to 2019, following consultations with the ambassadors of the African member countries of the OECD Development Center. We jointly hosted a round with the African Union Commission on the margins of the African Forum in Madrid, Spain. This roundtable gathered a wide range of African stakeholders as well as representatives of member countries of the Development Center. The Development Center then was encouraged to work with the African Union to advance priorities for productive investment in Africa and harness opportunities for policy dialogue and mutual learning around three main work streams: on A, human capital development, B, continental integration, and C, infrastructure and connectivity. So today and tomorrow we will focus in two work streams: human capital development and infrastructure and connectivity. So my third point, and I'm concluding with this, where do we aim to go from here? Let me conclude with my last point on the direction of this journey. We have made important progress since November 2019 and built consensus on the questions that this platform should address. In this inaugural meeting of the platform today, we will discuss issues at the core of human capital development in Africa. The acquisition of relevant skills is a necessary condition for productive transformation to reduce informality and realize the demographic dividend. Yes, I would like to recall that youth are Africa's more important asset. 375 million youth will reach working age by 2035. This is a huge amount. It's bigger than the European Union population. And if they are equipped with education and relevant skills, and if enough job opportunities are created, Africa will realize its demographic dividends. Human capital goes beyond education and skills too, because only 18% of Africa's population is covered by some form of social protection. The African Union affirmed social protection for all as a key priority in its 2015 Declaration on Employment, Poverty, Eradication, and Inclusive Development. For this reason, our discussion on human capital will look at issues such as skills acquisition, school-to-work transition, technical and vocational education and training, and social protection systems. And tomorrow, we will discuss how to mobilize investment in quality infrastructure, paying attention to the soft elements of infrastructure. These soft elements are often less understood, yet equally important to attract investment and increase connectivity performance. In particular, this work stream will support ongoing efforts on regional infrastructure connectivity, notably within the second phase of the African Union's Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa to 2021-2030 that was launched earlier this month. This work will also benefit from the inputs of the technical committee led by the Development Center and the African Center for Economic Transformation. And at a subsequent meeting, at a date to be determined, we will deal with continental integration. The objective there will be to focus on 3 sets of policies to develop a strategic cluster of firms, facilitate the emergence of regional production networks, and enhance firms' integration into value chains. This work will leverage the OECD initiative for policy dialogue on global value chains, production transformation, and development. Over the next years, these 3 work streams will identify and share good practices for implementation, inform policymakers in Africa and its partner countries, and hopefully result in greater mobilization of quality investment and productive transformation. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Cohen Dons from the European Union said yesterday, we largely agree on what needs to be done. The problem is implementation. So now, let's do it. I am confident that this African Union OECD Development Center platform will help us make this happen. I thank you all, and I look forward for a very productive dialogue. Thank you for your attention, and now, Luis, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your excellent introduction. And now let me turn to Honorable Albert Muchanga. He is Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mine at the African Union Commission. Under his portfolio of tourism, statistics, economic integration, many relevant issues. Commissioner, thank you again for joining us today. You have been recently nominated again, and you have the floor, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremony, and Your Excellency, Mr. Manuel Escudero, the Chairperson of the Governing Board of the OECD Development Center, and also Permanent Representative of Spain to the OECD. Your Excellencies, Permanent Representatives and Heads of Mission in this meeting, Mr. Mario Pezin, the Director of the OECD Development Center, and also very happy to see my good friend, Stefano. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I join Ambassador Escudero in warmly welcoming all of you to the joint African Union OECD platform on investment and productive transformation in Africa, being held under the theme, Investing in Human Capital and Infrastructure amidst the COVID-19 pandemic towards recovery and resilience. This meeting has 2 key objectives. It first aims to integrate the platform's work streams on human capital and infrastructure connectivity. The second aim is to review the common challenges of these work streams for the platform to address. And this will be done through analysis, peer learning, capacity building, and exploring synergies with other ongoing initiatives. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse the development progress attained in Africa over the past years. The African Union Commission made a focus that Africa's economic growth was set to decline by between -2.1% to -4.9% in 2020. The actual figure is -3%, which plunged most of the economies of the continent into a recession for the first time in 25 years. Africa further experienced fiscal challenges characterized by expanded budget deficits as tax revenues decreased. The extra budget resources are being channeled towards fighting the pandemic and revitalizing the economies. Against this background, recovery from this crisis calls for the urgent need to scale up production capabilities, coupled with the expansion and diversification of markets for goods and services in order to bring into play more resilient and sustainable growth as well as structural transformation. At this stage, let me point out that the joint African Union OECD Development Center platform on investment and productive transformation is articulated around 3 work streams. And the work streams are human capital development, continental integration, and mobilizing investments in infrastructure connectivity. Investing in human capital is paramount for productive transformation to sustainably take place in Africa. The need comes against a background where Africa's youth population is growing rapidly. With this youth bulge, the African labor force is projected to increase to 375 million by 2035. The message is that this labor force must be supplied with decent job opportunities. The African youth will emerge as the chief drivers of economic growth if equipped with solid education, skills, and decent job opportunities. This requires effective harnessing of human capital investment. Between 12 to 12 million young Africans enter the labor market each year, and the continent creates only 3.7 million jobs annually. Sustained unemployment and underemployment of our youth can be threats to social and political stability. As we prioritize human capital development in Africa, we should also foster appropriate skills development, including digital skills that also translate into employability. As part of the process of promoting self-employment among the youth, we have teamed up with the African E-Trade Group, an African diaspora social enterprise, to organize a youth startup competition to exhibit at the second Inter-African Trade Fair, scheduled to take place in Kigali, Rwanda, in September this year. The competition will focus on securing among the competitors space to exhibit at the fair, and altogether there will be 150 places. Among the young entrepreneurs who will be chosen, we'll also be taking into account regional and gender balance, and they will be facilitated by networking with venture capital firms. And out of this competition and selection, as well as involvement of the venture capitalists, we project business-to-business transactions of about $3 billion to emerge from this pavilion alone. Beyond the fair, the young entrepreneurs will also become employers of the fellow youth and become role models. Let me now turn to the question of African continental economic integration. In this area, Africa must focus on 3 measures that deepen our market. These are removal of tariff and non-tariff barriers, development of inter-country and inter-regional transport, communications, and energy linkages, and number 3, progressive alignment of domestic policies to those of the African continental free trade area. With these measures, we shall be in a place to create a large and a progressive attractive market that can unleash the drive towards developing firms' strategic clusters, facilitating regional production networks, and enhancing firms' integration to local, regional, and global value chains, and in the process, enable us to achieve productive transformation. At the current level of African economic integration, effective implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is paramount. In addition to the 3 key measures outlined above, this also demands the development of production and supply chains to cater for a market of 1.3 billion people, expected to rise to 1.7 billion by 2030. Within this population is also a growing middle class, which is expected to drive domestic consumption across the African continent. Domestic consumption is key to stimulating increased intra-African trade. Our focus on the supply side of the African Continental Free Trade Area will be facilitating the development of regional value chains, which are also expected to contribute to generating win-win outcomes in continental integration. As a complement, there will also be a focus on promoting investments in technology and innovation as means of boosting competitiveness. As earlier mentioned, a well-developed infrastructure network is vital to facilitating connectivity, and in the process, deliver efficiency gains to producers and suppliers across the length and width of our continent. From the foregoing, it is clear that mobilizing investments in infrastructure connectivity is crucial for increased investments in Africa and productive transformation across the continent. The African Development Bank estimates that annually, the continent needs $130 to $170 billion a year for infrastructure development. This target is not met, leaving a financing gap of between $67.6 to $107.5 billion annually. This shortfall translates into inadequate roads, inadequate railways, inadequate port facilities, and poor and expensive communication linkages, as well as energy deficits. These shortfalls further translate into additional 30 to 40% increases in the cost of goods traded among African countries. It is expected that the start of trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area will attract public-private partnerships that will contribute in meeting this infrastructure financing gap. The Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa offers an integrated and full and multi-sectoral approach necessary to enhance connectivity across the continent. In line with the new multi-sector objective under PIDA, the workstream should help address common link challenges in effecting synergies and complementarities between interdependent cross-border infrastructure, both hard and soft. The message here is that as we increase the stock of physical infrastructure across Africa, we should also aim to generate efficient connectivity as incentives for attracting investments in our productive transformation projects. As part of the process of strengthening public-private partnership to bridge the financing gap for infrastructure development across Africa, domestic resource mobilization remains critical. Annually, the continent is losing significant resources that can help improve its infrastructure development program. Over $8 billion is lost annually through illicit financial flows, and more than $50 billion is lost through tax evasion. As I conclude, let me emphasize that the COVID-19 pandemic reinforces the urgency of a novel approach to design, recovery, and transformation strategies and financing frameworks to facilitate Africa's sustained growth and transformation. In this respect, promoting policies geared towards investing in human capital and infrastructure amidst the COVID-19 pandemic is vital to accelerate Africa's recovery and resilience by investing in productive transformation. I'll stop here and wish you successful deliberations, and I look forward to receiving and reading the outcome document. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and I yield the floor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your intervention. That was clear. And now I would like to give the floor to the moderator of the session, Mario Pesini, the director of the OECD Development Center and a special advisor to the OECD Secretary General on Development, and my boss. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Luis Padilla. Thank you, Albert Muchanga, and thank you also Manuel Escudero. So you gave us clear direction for the work that we have to comply with. You said we are creating a platform, needs to be complementary with other efforts, needs to be clear in terms of analysis, but it also needs to provide specific proposal, because that's the scope. We discuss, but we try to figure out also idea that then will have to be approved, obviously, in the respective important decision table. So together with the thanks to the honorable speakers in the opening segment, I would like to invite the speakers that are with us to try to figure out also specific proposal. It's a kind of heroic task because we have a very important, very bright contributor around this table, but at the same time, we have little time. So let me say, we have three messages. Human development and inequalities constitute one of the four major transitions underway in Africa, along with demographic, technological, and other related elements that are connected with natural resources and food security. Second, catalyzing investment in the continent's human resources, and particularly in its youth, we have heard, will remain paramount in the COVID-19 recovery period to safeguard hard-won gains, but also to bounce back from the crisis stronger. And third, shed light on existing strategies and priorities and identify policy that will enhance investment in human capital and better support Africa's productive transformation. With that in mind, as I said, we have a very important series of contribution. And let me start first with a contribution that can come from the Honorable Amira Al-Fadil, which is a commissioner for Social Affairs, and ask her to deliver her keynote statement in 5 minutes. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll start by thanking you, Mr. Mario Pesini, and I thank His Excellency also Mr. Manuel Escudero, and my brother and colleague, Commissioner Albert Muchanga. And thank you to all participants, and thank you for inviting me. At the beginning, I wish to acknowledge the importance of the collaboration between the OECD and the African Union Commission as a platform to bolster the reflection on development strategies on the continent. Also, this event today is another step happening at a time of the unprecedented global health crisis, which is COVID-19 pandemic, which has economic and social implications disturbing the lives of the people globally and in Africa and also globally. Excellencies, the African Union took a strong stand against the pandemic with bold measures to save lives and safeguard the well-being of our populations. A COVID-19 fund was set up with significant contributions by our member states to accelerate the implementation of the AU COVID-19 response strategy as an emergency strategy. And allow me here to mention that in the establishment of the fund, the Africa private sector was fully engaged, and out of the 11 members we have on the board, 4 of them are coming from the private sector. The chair of the board himself is coming from the private sector. On the other side, the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is our technical institution, the specialized technical institution, was placed at the center of a continental coordinating operational approach in implementing the response strategy. And when I say the response strategy, it is our anti-COVID-19 response strategy, which is a continental strategy approved by our ministers of health and later endorsed by our heads of states and government. And this continental strategy, for me, it is the driving strategy now for the response of the whole continent. And what we did is we managed to make Africa speak with one voice, and also I think we managed to have the solidarity and the togetherness between our member states in fighting COVID-19. Excellence is also the continent managed to maintain control of the virus during the first wave, with all countries engaging in reforms of their health systems and investing in enhancing their social protection systems. Although concerns were raised with a more severe second wave, we remain confident that member states will be able to limit the consequences of our population. Africa is affected like the rest of the world, but we are still the least affected continent. However, Excellency, the Union called for more solidarity and equity in access to the COVID-19 vaccines, which is the challenge. The challenge we are having today is accessibility to the vaccines for Africa. We thank COVAX facility. They are going to provide Africa with 27% to cover 27% of the targeted population. But our strategy, vaccine strategy in Africa, we are targeting 60% of our population to be covered. Excellencies, with sustained diplomatic and financial efforts through Africa CDC, the continent was able to secure more than 270 million doses from Johnson & Johnson, and this is just an example, but we have also secured different amounts from different vaccine manufacturers around the world, from Russia, from China, in India, many vaccines. We might secure different amounts for the continent. Excellencies, the African Union has adopted policies on education and skills development. This is to start answering your second question. The African Union adopted policies on education and skills development, including through DEVIT systems, labor and decent work. However, transiting to the new post-COVID-19 normal, these policies should contain bold and appropriate reforms to respond to the need, responsive and effective human capital with enhanced learning outcomes at all levels in equitable ways. The AU Agency for Development, AUDA, which is NIBAD, is tackling the challenges of skills mismatch with the labor market demand through strong partnership with our regional economic communities known as REX, and also with our member states, plus our international partners. The principles of relevancy, effectiveness, and efficiency, flexibility, agility, and adaptability, equity, and equal access will distill all policies on human capital. The opportunity of ICT, which helped in fighting the pandemic, should be leveraged at scale to transform the provision and delivery standards of health, education, skills development, and utilities such as power, water, and transport. So we need the right infrastructure for this. And these points were mentioned by Commissioner Albert. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, considering the large spectrum of arrangements hit by the global health crisis, and in view of keeping the human capital endowment safe, the African Union has developed the AU Comprehensive Socio-Economic and environmental response to COVID-19 health pandemic, caring for human security. And Excellencies, this is an initiative developed internally by the 8th department of the African Union, which is now, after the election, became 6th department, but all of the departments within the African Union with their different mandates, they participated in developing this comprehensive document. This initiative, it embraces all the domains of human capital, from vulnerable groups such as women, children, and persons with disability, to social protection policies, basic social services, utilities like water, sanitation, energy, housing, electricity, and transport, formal and informal labor, plus sports and culture. All these areas were covered in the socioeconomic comprehensive initiative. These social policy pillars are identified from the perspectives of human respect and protection of human rights, and mirror the social agenda 2063, and Excellencies, also the agenda, the social agenda 2063 is an addendum to agenda 2063, which covers the rest of the sectors. The overarching social development policy instrument that was adopted by the African Union in February 2020. This is our social agenda 2063. And Excellencies, I would like also to mention here that we have shared this document with all our partners here on the level of Addis Ababa. 11 of our partners, UN agencies and other international partners, they have their inputs in this initiative. They have been consulted on this document, and their inputs were incorporated in this document. For the comprehensive response and to coordinate the implementation of this successor, a micro unit needs to be incubated at AOC level to spearhead its coordinated implementation as a first step. And this is still a proposal on the table to our principals that to look into establishing a unit to follow up the implementation of this initiative, because we need the different stakeholders within the Commission and with the partners. We need to coordinate these efforts for implementation. The African Union Commission and the OECD can embark on joint advocacy along with the UN agencies and other international partners for support to the implementation of the AU comprehensive socioeconomic and environmental response to COVID-19 health pandemic. And this is a call to you as OECD. We are ready to share with you the document, and we can have discussions if you would like to be part of it with your technical people, and we can see the areas that we can cooperate for the implementation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would like to mention some of the areas that I would like us to stress more. Firstly, the youth and female workforce is massively engaged in the informal economy in Africa without requisite policies and schemes to recognize their skills. In the majority of countries, through traditional apprenticeships, they were contributing to an average of 40% of the continental GDP before the pandemic, and will be a crucial driver for equity and resilience in post COVID-19 period. That we need to pay more attention to our female workforce, and they are covering, in some countries, 70% of the informal sector is covered by women. Secondly, workers in formal enterprises still continue to be hit by job losses resulting from the pandemic, and this is deemed to continue for months to come. And I believe this is happening globally. People are losing their jobs because of this COVID-19. For Africa to be competitive in the new normal economy competition, especially while we have opportunities created by the ACFTA, we should significantly invest in upskilling and reskilling of skills to make the current skills stocks fit to the new normal, as many occupations will be affected by content changes, and the workplace also will be transformed in many organizational and technological aspects. This will be imperative to rebuild and lift up the productivity level to improve competitiveness. We have opportunities created by ACFTA and this is my brother Moshinga's area. I'm not going to go into details, but there is opportunities. Unfortunately, the opportunities created by ACFTA came at this time of the global pandemic. Still, we can make use of these opportunities. We can push for these opportunities to be realistic and to be taken by especially by our young Africans. Excellencies, the third point is embracing the life cycle social protection approach of the AU Social Agenda 2063. We should pay more attention to early childhood education. This is paramount to engage a deep structural change towards a lifelong learning in Africa. Finally, for a comprehensive funding of skills development in line with the AU policies on TEFID and the AU Plan of Action on Employment, Poverty Eradication, and Inclusive Development, we must work on public-private partnership schemes. Beyond the funding, the BPP can provide means to effectively address the long-standing challenges of skills mismatch and anticipation, which cause to individuals, families, societies, and economies. And Excellencies, as I said earlier, the private sector in Africa, the private sector outside Africa are fully engaged, and we are always looking for public-private partnerships, especially in the health domain. Excellencies, I wish to conclude by stressing the renewed availability of the African Union Commission to continue the collaboration with OECD and other international partners to address the challenges and perspectives as we move towards the post-COVID-19 recovery. AU policies offer the ground for such collaboration. Excellencies, this is my statement, and I will look forward to more coordination and collaboration with OECD. My department is ready. My department is responsible about labor, employment, and migration, which is a section that's relevant to what we are talking about today about developing the human capital. Also, we are responsible about health. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for making specific proposal on which we can continue the work after the end of this conference. And you can count on us already for every suggestion you have given concerning social protection, in general, the issue of health, obviously on women, where we have some activities and we work also in perspective of the realization of Objective 5 of the SDGs, and obviously on early childhood and all the other fields you have mentioned. Count on us, we will continue this conversation starting from tomorrow, of course. Let me now move to our speaker discussant in this session. We have a very relevant panel. We have Fatin Ziasane. She is the head of Human Capital and Institution Development at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. And yesterday we were with Ibrahim Mayaki as well. We have Stefano Manservisi. He is advisor to UNESCO, Assistant Director General for Education and Governing Board member of the United Nations Technology Bank for LDCs. But Stefano has a very long history working on many areas of the European Commission, but in particular being one of the maker of policy of international cooperation of a new era and generation. We have Dimitri Sanga. He is director of the Multisectoral Regional Office for West Africa at UNESCO. Emma Theophilus. She is member of Parliament and Deputy Minister of Information and Communication Technology of Namibia. Welcome. And Lomboli Kumboneki is a program officer on HIV/AIDS at the Southern African Development Community, SADC. Therefore, let's ask a first round of questions, and recalls that the speaking time will be of 3 minutes, so let's more interact to each other. And let me start with Ms. Nzi Hassane. How has NEPAD adapted to the delivery of skills and vocational training programs amid the COVID-19 pandemic? And what do you think should the NEPAD do in the future? What are the suggestions that you are making to us? Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pezzini. It's a pleasure to see you. Quickly, I would like to recognize the presence of the commissioners, of the various ministers and members of parliaments, and of colleagues from OECD and all panelists and participants. Thank you very much. This is an absolutely crucial question. We're actually trying to respond to the issue in twofold. The first one is to look at how can we understand what is emerging as the productive sectors in African Union member states. And once we have, or as we are trying to respond to this question, then we're also supporting the member states in determining how we can help building the capacity for the transition and leapfrogging of the economic development. Maybe a couple of things that we're doing actively on the first issue, determining the productive sectors in the member states. Under the leadership of the African Union Commission, we have commissioned a macro and labor markets analysis study, also with GIZ, under the Skills Initiative for Africa program. So the studies took place in 8 countries: Cameroon, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Togo, and Tunisia. The reason why we're doing this study is to analyze the economic trends in the different countries so that we can identify the important sectors for employment and income generation in the future. We identify the subsectors, we rank them based on their current ability and the forecast potential to create jobs, decent jobs, and generate economic opportunities for the African population. We are also undertaking a study with ILO in the skills anticipation so that we can determine the breadth and the depth of skills and competence that we require in order to support the productive sectors. A couple of findings that I can share, maybe I'll have the opportunity to go further, is that the subsectors, they vary from a country to another, but they are dominated by 3 subsectors across the continent. It's manufacturing, it's wholesale and retail, and it's also agriculture. And we expect these sectors to also absorb more jobs in the post-COVID-19 era. Another key finding is that informal employment is very high across the continent, and underemployment is also one of the reasons explaining the high number of people in the informal area. The second issue I was referring to was how we can build the human capacity that will be necessary for the transition and for the leapfrogging of economic development. In this regard, I can share just a couple of priorities. The first one is to ensure that the TVET graduates are equipped with the right skills in order to be competitive in the labor market. And for this, we need to design the curriculum that meet the demand from the private sector enterprises. So there's a need to increase collaboration and dialogue between the demand and the supply side through a collaboration with the private sector, internship, apprenticeship, working groups that include employers, association, and government officials. Another initiative that we can share is the Skills Initiative for Africa, as I mentioned earlier. We launched within the Skills Initiative for Africa a financing facility of today 100 million euros, aimed at providing up to 3 million euros grants to individual investment projects in the 8 countries I mentioned before. Linked to this finance facility, we also have an African skills portal for youth employment and entrepreneurship. We also call it Aspire, and it's a knowledge repository which holds a collection of Africa-wide best practices on innovation in the private TVET sector in order to improve the skills and work readiness training. Just before I yield the floor back, I would like to also mention the work we're doing around gender transformative approaches, specifically around the agricultural TVET for women program. We are trying to center how to mainstream empowerment for women, not only in the ATVET, but also in the TVET work in general and also beyond. We believe this will lead to increasing women's potential in the labor market, as we know that socioeconomic barriers lie hidden into social cultural norms and belief systems. And that is to end the effect. To this end, it has often resulted in the exclusion of women and girls. These are just some examples of initiatives we have undertaken along the lines of skills development and development of human capacity. These are the areas in which we have been active as AUD and NEPAD, and we're also willing and ready to collaborate with partners. Thank you, Mr.
Fatih. Just a question. In a certain sense, maybe I'm wrong, but I have the impression that what you are talking about is in reality building with different inputs and stream an observatory on the insertion of people in the labor market, monitoring also where they are going, what they are doing, what are the discrimination. Now, if you get to this, and I sorry to ask you an answer in less than 1 minute, but what is lacking to have an observatory? Today, do you see that there are areas where there is a clear need that you are still not covering to build an observatory, not to analyze the labor market, that's obviously very wide, but to build an observatory?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Pedini. There is obviously a dimension that is that can be assimilated to an observatory, but remember, we're trying to build the necessary evidence so that it can feed into our own programming, our own design, and ultimately in implementing the relevant and right initiatives, projects, and programs for the African Union member states. One thing that is lacking is the availability of data, linked also to the systems that can gather and ensure the relevance of the data, and also the capacity of the African Union member states. Remember that as AUDA NEPAD, our role is to provide technical advisory based on evidence to member states, but also to build their own capacity so that they can do without us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me move to Stefano Manservisi. You have been actively involved in the design and delivery of education programs for almost all your career. So how has the pandemic both challenged the global education agenda and prompted the international community to rethink its architecture? What is happening on that side, Stefano?
Thank you, Mario, and good morning to everybody. Special thanks to my sister, Amir El-Fadil, and brother Muchanga, and all the friends of the African Union here. I mean, today, very happy to be in this family that I know quite well. Now, since time is short, I would like just to say three things, and responding to your question, Mario. First, you know, what is the status of the education hit by COVID? I think that everybody knows the figures, you know, I mean, 260 million out of school, 6 out of 10, you know, which are not even ready to read a story after the secondary, you know, the teachers which are missing, you know, and financing which are reduced. This is clearly, let's say, the negative immediate impact, which requires an immediate response. I mean, to protect education, meaning to reopen the schools, meaning to find the teacher, meaning to increase the quality in order to be attractive as a place for families, and to securize a certain number of funding. So this is what I would call protect. But at the same time, you know, there is a figure which is particularly important to realize that this is not enough if it is done alone. Is that 65% of children that today are entering the primary school will end up into a job that today does not exist yet. So therefore, it is something which is not enough just to say, let's put back to school children, pupils, etc., if you are not at the same time investing on this sort of constant modification of what education is in order to prepare the same children to be suitable for jobs which are not existing yet and which are created by all the transformations which are accelerated, digital, green, all this. Now, this is important because it suggests that we have not only the protect duty, but to have also the increased duty, i.e. to scale up, in order to be clear that education is, from my point of view, from many points of view, the key asset to not only build back better, but to build the future better in a more sustainable way. Now, if this is the situation, what are we confronting? We are confronted to, let's say, two things which are problematic. The first one is that the global architecture of the education sector is very complicated, is one of the most fragmented. Just to give an example, if in the health we have quite a recognizable, let's say, a trio, in the Global Fund, the WHO, the Gavi, basically, which are able at the same time to be implementing and also to steer decision. If you look at education, you don't have anything about this. You have platforms like the GPE. You have many agencies, of all kinds, each of them working very well, by the way, but also work in a very vertical, way. Now, what this can imply? First, we have to avoid the risk of a sort of harmful competition for scarce funds. This will be mortal, because instead of a dynamic of aggregation, we create a dynamic of fragmentation. So the problem is the architecture. And the second one is the fact that, you need also to have some policy choices, because the second thing which is missing at global level is that there is a fair separation between the policy setting and the steering and the implementation of the money. So that if you don't have a place where you define what are the strategic challenges for what I would call a global education policy cycle. Therefore, these are the challenges that I see. And these are very important in Africa, because I was listening very, very, very attentively to all the description of what is been done and doing by the African Union Commission, by NEPAD, by all the countries, But there is also a gap between what is coming up structured in sense of demand and what is, let's say, the structure of the global architecture, which is supposed to contribute to the supply. And therefore, this is a mismatch that must be addressed. Now, what is happening? It's happening that UNESCO, as the agency which has been tasked by the Secretary General to coordinate the implementation of SDG 4, now requested by the GEM, which was the Global Education Meeting of last year, to set up some proposals in order to address at the same time the fragmentation and the policy steer. This process is ongoing. There are working groups which are meeting in order to put together all the different stakeholders and to report with options for action at the next global education meeting of this year, which presumably will be in July, around the usual moment in which there is a wrapping up about the SDGs implementation. I think it will be extremely important that this platform can take an active, let's say, participation to this process, because I repeat, it is about a realistic way to reduce the fragmentation while delivering immediately, but second also to create, at least in a visible way, a sort of global architecture where there is policy setting, policy steer, where we are going, where are the priority, which kind of challenges, and the implementation of the money, which otherwise will turn into, let's say, an investment in a vacuum, not steered by a process. Therefore, I suggest as a concrete proposal that this platform, which is linking together, already policy makers precisely, can associate itself to this process led by UNESCO, but open, obviously, open consultation, that Africa in particular, in the regional consultation, takes a very strong and leading position in order to make sure that there is not the too often mismatch existing, but what is done by donors at global level and what is really needed by protagonists at national level. Therefore, this is the first proposal. A second proposal is to link this initiative or this platform to the financing stream. There is ongoing also in the G20 and in the IMF now finally the fact to have a special issuing of special drawing rights. Everybody knows what are the rules, what are the limits. But I think that there are ongoing works, done by UNECA and by the African Union to create a sort of special purpose vehicle in which the special drawing rights, part of them, could be put in order precisely to allow entering into the financial market at advantageous condition to be able to offer guarantees to the private investors, for example, and to allow, therefore, under the African control, a real financial mechanism which can, at the same time, be sheltering those which are not mature to go to the market, but also using all the liquidity which is around. So therefore, two ideas on which I think this platform could actively contribute, and we can keep talking about that together. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Stefano. I'm really very, very impressed because I was asking for a suggestion, a recommendation, direction to go, and I am actually getting answers. I have listed at least three now, the point on the cooperation we can realize on everything related to social protection that is conducted by the Commission, the African Commission. Second, in this idea of building a system of information about labor market, working on data and working on the structuring of evidence to monitor the relation with the labor market. And now your two very important proposals, the one in cooperating with UNESCO in order to avoid competition, but rather develop synergies with also this idea of a global education policy cycle, and therefore why not to connect the two things, and also the specific financial stream proposal. Let me recall that Stefano is also the chair in the T20 of the area that is dealing with the SDGs. So he knows what he's talking about in this case. Let me now move to Dr. Sanga from UNESCO and ask therefore, comment les gouvernements africains peuvent-ils concevoir et mieux cibler les programmes de formation afin de faciliter la transition entre l'école et le monde du travail pour les jeunes des zones urbaines et rurales, et aussi pour mettre leurs compétences au niveau de celles des autres concurrents régionaux. Comment donc les gouvernements africains peuvent-ils cibler les programmes de formation?
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais saluer leurs excellences qui sont avec nous ici et commencer par dire que la réponse à cette question est multiforme. Je vais ici me concentrer sur l'enseignement et la formation technique et professionnelle, qui est un élément important de ce capital humain que nous voulons bâtir pour accompagner l'Afrique pour atteindre ses objectifs tels que définis dans l'agenda 2063. Deux éléments importants qui militent dans le sens de mettre l'accent sur l'enseignement technique et professionnel, c'est d'abord le fait que dans l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, les pays africains prônent ce qu'on appelle la transformation structurelle des économies. Et cette transformation structurelle ne peut pas avoir lieu si nous n'avons pas la masse critique des jeunes qui sont formés et qui peuvent accompagner cette transformation. Deuxième élément, c'est aussi l'avènement de la zone de libre-échange continentale. Qu'est-ce que ces pays africains vont échanger entre eux s'ils n'ont pas transformé suffisamment sur ce continent les biens et services qu'il faut échanger? Maintenant, comment est-ce qu'on peut concevoir ces programmes de formation? Je dirais qu'il y a trois points essentiels sur lesquels on devrait insister. Le premier, c'est que les pays africains devraient s'approprier les stratégies et les orientations qui sont mises au niveau international, que, par exemple l'UNESCO, notre organisation, à développer des stratégies qui permettent de mieux cibler les programmes de formation afin de combler cette transition de l'école vers le travail. Il y a une série de recommandations dont je vais rapidement faire mention ici. Il y a une recommandation de l'UNESCO concernant l'enseignement et la formation technique et professionnelle, sous lequel, par exemple, on insiste sur le système de reconnaissance, de validation et d'accréditation des connaissances, des compétences acquises grâce à l'apprentissage tant formel qu'informel. Il y a aussi une série de recommandations de l'UNESCO concernant l'éducation et l'apprentissage des adultes, qui stipule et reconnaît la validation et l'accréditation des résultats de la participation à l'apprentissage et à l'éducation non formelle et formelle par les adultes. Et une troisième série de recommandations sont sous la stratégie de l'UNESCO pour l'enseignement et la formation technique et professionnelle. Et sous cet angle-là, on veut à ce que les programmes d'études incluent à la fois des compétences qui sont liées au travail et des compétences transférables, mais aussi des compétences entrepreneuriales. Parce que sur ce continent, généralement, on forme les jeunes gens et ces jeunes gens s'attendent à être des salariés. Mais il faut aussi les former à pouvoir créer des emplois et utiliser les autres jeunes. Il s'agit aussi de renforcer la coopération internationale dans le développement de la reconnaissance des qualifications. L'Union africaine et les commissions économiques régionales sont en train de favoriser la libre circulation des personnes et des biens. Et pour ce faire, il faut que les compétences acquises dans un pays puissent être reconnues dans un autre. Et pour cela, il faut cette coopération internationale dans le développement et la reconnaissance transfrontalière des qualifications. Deuxième volet, les pays devraient intensifier les projets déjà existants en cours qui sont couronnés de succès. Par exemple, au sein de l'UNESCO, nous avons un programme, un projet d'autonomisation des jeunes par l'enseignement et la formation professionnelle que nous sommes en train de faire en Gambie pour permettre aux jeunes d'avoir des meilleures chances de trouver un emploi décent. C'est un projet qui pourrait être mis à l'échelle non seulement de la Gambie, mais aussi des autres pays de la sous-région. Nous avons un projet en cours sur le programme de compétences et d'éducation technique dont bénéficient un certain nombre de pays, que ce soit en Afrique de l'Ouest qu'en Afrique centrale. Tous ces projets sont des projets sur lesquels les pays, les communautés économiques régionales peuvent bâtir pour les mettre à la disposition des autres pays et les rendre à l'échelle. Et troisième point, ça serait à demander le soutien technique et l'accompagnement de l'UNESCO et d'autres partenaires. Par exemple, notre Institut international sur la planification de l'éducation a mis en place une plateforme d'expertise en formation professionnelle qui vise à soutenir la mise en œuvre des politiques innovantes de formation professionnelle. Donc, nos pays peuvent avoir accès à cette plateforme-là. Finalement, en tant qu'institution internationale et les autres institutions régionales, il nous faut travailler main dans la main, bâtir des synergies afin de mutualiser les ressources, tant humaines que financières, pour optimiser l'impact dans ce domaine de l'enseignement technique et professionnel. Dans cette perspective, par exemple, il y a une initiative panafricaine pour la transformation digitale et numérique des systèmes d'enseignement technique et professionnel que nous allons mettre en place pour le développement des compétences en Afrique. Nous réunissons autour de la table la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, la Banque africaine de développement, l'Agence de développement NEPAD, l'Institut de formation et d'enseignement de la francophonie, la CEDEAO. Nous travaillons ensemble pour mettre en place cette initiative panafricaine. Cette initiative vise à créer un écosystème qui permettra la transformation numérique des systèmes d'enseignement technique et professionnel. Elle inclut plusieurs volets et je voudrais juste partager quelques-uns avec vous. Le premier, ça serait un programme panafricain d'information dans le domaine. Deuxièmement, créer un réseau qui permettra d'échanger des bonnes pratiques dans ce domaine-là. Et troisièmement, créer un centre d'excellence sur la transformation numérique des systèmes d'enseignement et de formation technique et professionnelle. Ce projet va être lancé incessamment, ça serait au mois de mars, pour pouvoir bénéficier à plus d'un pays au sein de ce continent. Je voudrais m'arrêter ici et vous remettre la parole, monsieur le modérateur.
Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. Cela, entre autres, est très en cohérence avec les choses dites avant. Donc, je pense que ça renforce un petit peu cette idée d'essayer de voir les connexions entre la plateforme dans laquelle on se trouve à présent et l'initiative de Global Education Policy Cycle qui a été mentionnée avec toutes ces articulations que maintenant vous nous avez aidé à comprendre. Alors, and now, let me ask to Ms. Theophilus. She's the youngest member of the parliament, and therefore, as such, what are the initiatives and pieces of legislation that you support to better equip the youth, which is Africa's most valuable resource, in finding a job in a pervasively informal labor market? What are your initiatives there?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mario Pezzini. Good afternoon to you all commissioners, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Namibia's predicament is not very different from everyone else's on the continent and in the world, especially during this pandemic. Namibia has, through the National Planning Commission and the Ministry of Higher Education and Training and Innovation, tried to consolidate a strategy around linking the education programs that are given in institutions of higher learning in relation to the market needs. And right now, the priority is around technical skills because the country is moving towards an industrialization program, and we have what we call the growth at home strategy, which, considering Namibia has a 60% population of young people under the age of 35, they are the ones at the helm to be able to get our nation to industrialization. So some of the policies at hand are, one, the growth at home strategy, and two, the ease of doing business and registering a business. Because of the soft skills that exist, there is a mismatch in the skills being put into the market and the skills that the market needs. At this point, we even have an overflow of soft skills in the market, and many young graduates are finding themselves unemployed upon graduation. But there is a lack of TVET skills, technical skills to be able to grow the industries that need growing. I think Ms. Fati Hassan spoke about some of those industries needed, and Namibia is no stranger to that because those apply to our country as well. So right now there is a transition to ensure that the skills being offered are technical in nature so that young people are equipped with the necessary skills to run and build their own businesses. And this is done through also equipping them with the necessary knowledge to know how to become entrepreneurs so that they not only employ themselves, but are able to employ other young people. The third initiative that I think is quite important and that many institutions are embarking on is to ensure that there are paid internships. I think many young people are availing their necessary knowledge and necessary skills, but they are unable to make ends meet because the necessary institutions, whether public or private, are not paying them the necessary minimum wages to be able to make a living. And this, thankfully, was also strengthened by Ministry of Labor and Employment Creation that has put up a minimum wage commission to ensure that all those in industries across the board in the country get the necessary minimum wage as opposed to the exploitation of those in the workforce. So our population is quite peculiar in that 60% are young people, and there is a disparity. You find that there are those that are skilled and those that are unskilled. You'll find disparities between urban and rural youth. And then you'll find an even bigger disparity between highly educated youth and very, very low educated youth. And in those disparities, you link it to income. And when you link it to income, you then link it to the way of life and sustainability of way of life, especially such as now in a pandemic. So all of these sort of interventions and strategies are trying to bridge the gap between young people that are employable and those that are not employable due to the lack of skills. And thankfully, the institutions of higher learning are working at smart partnerships between them here in the local country in Namibia and institutions of higher learning outside the continent and even on the continent to be able to share knowledge, share programs, and share infrastructure so that more and more young people are educated in order for them to be able to meet the demands of the industries that they need, but also meet the demands of the necessary skills. And I think at this point, there is a proactive look to ensure that technology, because it's moving so fast, the programs that are needed in the next decade or two need to be offered now. And institutions of higher learning through the Ministry of Higher Education are working in programs, training programs and education programs to ensure that the young people and students now are trained in those areas. And this has a number of benefits, of course, because through these collaborative efforts, we're able to curb the rising rural to youth migration of young people coming from rural areas to urban areas, and therefore sort of suffocating the necessary opportunities for these young people to be able to thrive in urban areas. So those interventions are on the table now. And as a young parliamentarian, I'm surely supporting them and using my Ministry of Information and Communication Technology to see how we can create synergies for technology to be at the forefront of the new skill sets being offered in training programs at institutions of higher learning and vocational schools to ensure that technology plays a bigger role because we are moving towards the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have heard of different initiatives. I will come back in a second on those related to the productive transformation and related to the relationship between school and industrialization. But we have also heard about the role that ECOWAS and regional community can play. So let me ask Dr. Kumboneki how the regional institution and economic community can retool their human resources and social programs so that they are adapted to the COVID recovery. Other times, what is the role? You are from SADC, so a very important regional community. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mario. Good morning. I would like also first to acknowledge the commissioners and good morning to all of your colleagues. And thank you for giving us the opportunity at SADC to take part of this from this panel. And the first, I think the first answer would be first that during the COVID has not brought new challenges for the countries or for the region in terms of social challenges that we've been facing before. The main question would be to say that the COVID has just highlighted the need and the importance of implementing and effective social programs and policies so that to ensure sustainability in the region. And in that regard, in SADC, we are aware of the importance of implementing comprehensive social protection programs. Hence, we have different directorates, different sectors which are working toward implementing that comprehensive and holistic approach as far as social protection programs are concerned. We are talking, for example, of social assistance. The need of social assistance has been implemented in the region for quite a while now. Member states are not at the same level. However, in different member states, we are seeing programs such as school nutrition, school feeding programs, which are being implemented. We have the cash transfers programs, which are being implemented in the region. But the main challenge which is being faced now is the issue of most of these programs are mainly relying on external donor or external fundings. So the main challenge at regional level and economic and at our level is to ensure sustainability by supporting, by providing member states with the tool which are going to help them into increase domestic funding of those social programs such as the social assistance. We are also looking at the issues of social insurance. Remember, the pandemic, as it has been rightly said, has caused so many losses of jobs across the region, across the continent, and across the world. So it's important for now us to talk about social insurance. Social insurance, like, for example, security for unemployment, security of livestock and livelihoods, and security also, the social insurance also as far as the health sector is concerned. So those are the points whereby we need to put more investment to ensure that we have policy which are in place, we have the legal and the political environment which is creating an enabling environment to attract more investment, not only government investment, but also from the private sectors within the region and private sectors within the continent. We are also looking at issues of supporting or caring for the most vulnerable, so through the social care services, and looking at those policies which are being implemented and which are being also through which member states are being supported. It's very important at this level right now to make sure that all those policies are implemented, and we work with country and governments to implement them at the micro level and coming up at the regional level so that we make it more stronger. And the last point that I would like to talk about when we are talking about the social program is mainly the labor. Looking at now the labor, the outlook of the labor markets is going to change after the COVID. We have now ICT who is prominent. We have now the different type of the way that we've been doing business will change. So it's important for us to look at how at regional level we can support member states. Which infrastructure can we be building? We need to build infrastructure which are going to be sustainable. We need to build infrastructure which are going to respond to the current needs and to the needs after COVID as far as the labor market is concerned. And talking about the regional institution is not only about social program. We have also asked a question concerning the human capital. Concerning the human capital, at regional level, we take it seriously through the education. Concerning education, we have been working hand in hand with the UNESCO through the pandemic to ensure that first, learning never stops, and after the pandemic, we're having a program and a program and the roadmap which is going to support member states in working throughout the pandemic and adapting how they are doing business in terms of educating and providing education post-pandemic. One of the first points that we're talking about is about mobilization of resources to implement those innovative and contextually appropriate solutions so that we can provide education and learning remotely. We all know that we have faced challenges during the COVID pandemic, especially that most of the schools where we've been facing schools closures and so forth. So many learners have been vulnerable. They could not access education. Hence, we are looking at how to build those infrastructures in the short term and in the long term to ensure that school learning never stops and sustainability in the education system. The e-learning platform for continual learning for learners it's very important in terms that is going to support the education sector and ensure also that we have the continuity in the education. And in the long and in the medium term, so what we are going to do now, at the regional level, we are going to foster mainly accelerate infrastructure development. Infrastructure development in terms of ICT and broadband access, and also minimizing employment generation, employment generation and entrepreneurship. So it's very important for us to work holistically in looking at the labor sector and the education sectors and ensuring sustainability as the post-COVID era. Thank you very much, and over to you for now.
Thank you. I think that this round of questions has already highlighted a lot of points. So let me just come back with few very directed questions and short answer. First, let me start with NEPAD. So NEPAD has clarified to us the importance of the Center of Excellence. And in a certain sense, it's obvious that we need to take into account data, and we need to take into account a supply of labor, but also demand and interaction between the two. That's what I call the observatory. In fact, in many discussions in other places in the world, we have seen that you tend to concentrate either on the supply of labor or on the demand, but never the two together. So it seems to me that there is a space here for further initiative. For example, we need to take into account what are the strategy of development that will implement the productive transformation so that we can understand better also what tomorrow will be the demand of labor. And to that, it will be very important to figure out how to put in place analysis, maybe at the level of country, of productive transformation. What are the strategy of productive transformation? And therefore, what will be the need in terms of labor? Secondly, I think it would be interesting to study how we can insert inside this publication of the Africa Union Commission, the so-called African Development Dynamics that we also Development Center produce together, if we will have to insert regularly analysis on the labor market. What do you think of these ideas? First, realize systematically productive transformation analysis of the strategy of country, and also having a place where every year we report on what is the situation on the labor market. I'm talking obviously to Nzi Asane.
Yes, I got that. Thank you very much, Mr. Pedini. I think that the strategy that you are suggesting is really what we should pursue. It's what we are trying to implement as the technical body of the African Union. It's an opportunity for me to mention one of the initiatives that we have launched in September 2019 in the sideline of the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's called 100,000 MSMEs, and it aims at providing not only skills, equip the MSMEs with the right skills, but also support them in getting access to financial opportunities and also to market opportunities, including public procurement processes and transnational markets. So already within this initiative, we are linking not only the development of the skills, but also generating more employment, and also linking with the private sector of multinationals for opportunities that will lead, hopefully, to increasing the number of jobs created. This is supported by a digital platform within which we gather the data on the impact of the support on the MSMEs. We also gather the data on the needs of the MSMEs, and we package this data and then also put it at the disposal of the member states and the development partners. So this is just for the first leg of your first question. Now, when it comes to the strategy in approaching the member states, it's really in the core of what we're doing as AUD and NEPAD. For anything to be sustainable, it needs to have some kind of translation in the national budgets. And national budgets also usually reflect the national development plans. So one of our work streams here is really to ensure that the African Union member states are sensitized and equipped enough to understand the job creation translation of their national strategies, and make sure that while we're working at this continental approach, we also engage with the member states so that we can also create national translations or domestications of what we're doing with the member states. But for this to happen in a sustainable way, then looping back into the issue of budgeting, national budget, and again, national development plans. And your proposal is very much welcome. And I did mention that through the 100,000 MSMEs, we will have the opportunity to gather a lot of data, and we would be very happy to collaborate with OECD in making sense of the data, of the way we collect the data, and also how we can interpret it and create value, as I mentioned, for the African Union member states and the development partners. I submit, Mr. Pedini.
Okay, thank you. That's done. So I will ask our colleague Annalisa Primi, which is in charge of this analysis of transformation, economic transformation analysis, to be in touch with you. And also we will have to further consider, obviously with our friend and brother Gabikini, how we can have in the African development dynamic the appearance of elements of the analysis on labor market every year. Now, a second question is for Stefano Manservisi. You introduced this very interesting platform and work that UNESCO is doing. When I was reflecting on form of cooperation, the first that came to my mind was from the side of the OECD PISA. And I said, well, maybe PISA can be rethought in a way that it can be applied more easily to African states. The process of PISA is very heavy, and before producing result, it takes time, but maybe we can consider adaptation. But what you are suggesting, Stefano, is a wider platform in which PISA can be a component, but in reality, you are suggesting both on the financial side and the organizational, education organizational side, something wider. What should be, what do you suggest as a next step, therefore, to get close and to start developing connection with this platform and taking advantage of synergies? Stefano.
Well, thank you. No, I think that what I wanted to underline is how crucial this moment is. You know, everybody's talking about money, money, money. We need to compete for money, etc., which is perfectly legitimate and perfectly normal. But what I'm simply saying is that how the whole education sector at large, by the way, including human capital, is facing this reality unequipped, in the sense that it is quite equipped, the demand, and Commissioner Fadil said that very clearly, you know, how they are thinking about this. But then when you go at global level, you see that there is huge fragmentation and no policy setting, or at least in any case, a divergence. Now, what the Global Education Meeting has asked, UNESCO to do is to put together all the different actors in this, being agencies, being countries, being in a process which is ongoing, in order precisely to realistically address this and to start, let's say, having the construction of this policy, let's say, setting or steering pillar, by the way, fed by data, which today are equally fragmented, because the fragmentation on the top is also impacting on the quality of data, which are very much fragmented. You know, you have vertical reporting, you don't have an aggregate reporting, and therefore the work that UNESCO is supposed to do is extremely difficult, and it is regularly ex post, not ex ante, in order to have data, in order to then, let's say, take policy decisions. So therefore, first thing is this. And just listening to you and all the work which is done by this platform, I think that this platform could be part of this consultation process, and therefore, you know, to connect with this UNESCO mainstream in order to consolidate this. The second one is about, keeping, let's say, the level of ambition in terms of looking forward on education a bit higher, because otherwise, if we are stopping only, which is obviously important, to the immediate need, you know, to reopen schools, which are absolutely fundamental. But if you don't take into consideration what I recalled, that the people which are going to school today are due possibly to work in a dimension which does not exist yet. You know, if you don't keep a strategic vision and investment into this not far away future, then you are not able to prepare this future, and you'll end up with maybe more children at school, but not with more inclusive society, knowledge-based society, and capacities of building policies. So therefore, this is how to reach this strand. Let's see together how we can do it, you know, to be part of this consultation. The other one is about financing, because just competing on the global pledges, GPE, etc. That's absolutely fantastic. But what is needed for Africa is what Africans are asking, funds which are managed by themselves in order to connect with the policies that they are defining. And they simply say that if now the debate and even the decision on the special emission of special drawing rights, will be allowed by United States, because this was the real problem until today, in spite of the big amount, how to avoid that this amount also is spread around without any meaningful impact. Just consider that of the 500 billions which could be envisaged of a special drawing right, at the end, few dozen can come to Africa only if we take this approach. Now, instead of doing this, let's keep working on some ideas which are coming out from UNECA, from the African Union Commission, which is to have an African fund on which this special drawing rights can be put at a certain moment in order to have an African managed, vehicle which is able at the same time to work on sheltering and de-risking private investment, but also to generate through blending and issuing bond on the market, a virtuous circle in which this money, instead of being fragmentedly used, is centralized. This is something which can be discussed, is an idea which will be presumably, let's say, considered within the G20, but I think it is inevitable, because otherwise, if the common framework for that is not filled with a concrete mechanism in order then to go to the market, it will remain just an operation which is basically defensive. On this too, I think you can join forces in this discussion in order to push ahead this and to add new ideas. Also on this, we can see how we can do it together.
Very helpful. I think this proposal would deserve also a few pages to be written, and maybe we can publish also in Development Matters with the point that you are making so clearly, so to be put and used in the debate. Amira El Fadil, I see you are very kindly still connected with us.
Yes,
and therefore you have heard the discussion. Social protection and gender and the point that you raised at the beginning are very important. We heard that they came back also in the role that the community can play, SADC, ECOWAS, and so on. So any specific proposal for what concerned the role that the community could play in this agenda that you designed so clearly at the beginning?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bezzini. And allow me, before commenting, to welcome Stefano. The last time we met, I think 2 years ago or more than that, and welcome to this meeting, and thank you for your proposals. I was listening, there is very interesting proposals coming out of these discussions. And I would like to say that because just Mr. Stefano mentioned about having a mechanism in Africa. I think the mechanism is AUDA, NIPAD. NIPAD now is turning into a development agency. So whatever we are saying about how to develop skills, how to mismatch skills, how to have these portability issues around developing even the TEBIT programs, I think the driving mechanism will be AUDA. And this is what our new area after we start implementing the structural reform of the African Union Commission. In this reform, we are giving more roles to NIPAD, which is now AUDA. We are also giving more roles to the regional economic communities. So this is we have the mechanisms. That's what I want to say in briefing, that the mechanism is there, but we need to strengthen this mechanism. We need to strengthen this mechanism. We need to provide this mechanism with more staffing, more funding. So that's what we need.
Yeah, that's very important.
On the area of commenting on about the women and the youth, I think we need to add to this conversation how to involve the civil society organizations, how to bring in the women organizations, how to bring in youth organizations. So the civil society, because we spoke about government a lot, we spoke about the roles of governments, reaching out to grassroots level, we have to engage the civil society organizations to fill this gap and to have the outreach to the grassroots level. I think this is an opportunity. Also, the informal sector, and how to make sure that this informal sector have the opportunity to be part of the formal sector, and how to encourage that, how to lead these startups projects and interdependent activities with capital, how to access capital. We need to engage more civil society organizations. We need to make sure that we will have even community leaders as part of this, have religious leaders as part of this. So engaging the civil society plus engaging more the private sector, we can have our objectives coming into reality, and we have more implementation, because the reality is governments alone cannot do it. No matter what good policies, good governance we have, we need to have the other stakeholders that can represent the society and can bring in the community. These are my comments, Mr. Bettini, and I would like to excuse myself because I have another commitment coming at 2.
No,
if
no,
you
but
allow me, I will stay for a few minutes, then I will leave.
But we thank you
very
very much, because you stay with us so much time, and we are very pleased, obviously, of your contribution. And let me also say clearly that from all this work, a lot of ideas came out. For sure, Nepad and Ibrahim Mayaki, that was with us yesterday, will be our next call when we will finish this conference, to see how further we can develop our cooperation, which is already huge and very fruitful. We have the proposal that came from UNESCO in a very clear way. And also, let me say that I was particularly pleased with Theophilus' idea of technical school and how to articulate this technical school for the role that small and medium-sized firms can play in the productive transformation, and therefore this is also another area. For what concerns the center, and our discussion took much more of the time that was allocated, because I am a bad moderator, obviously, but let me say the role that the center can play is a role of comparison across also region. And so we can bring in experiences that take place in also Latin America or in Asia, apart from those that come from the Europe, for example. But in this perspective, therefore, we can try to further develop the fights. And in particular, I think 3, those that were related with labor market and productive transformation strategies building, the idea concerning the role that UNESCO is playing in this field, and finally, all this matter concerning social protection, gender, and the role that regional communities can play. So I want to thank you, because you did the job that I asked for, and I asked for more in a rhetoric way, but you took me too seriously. And therefore, I am pleased with all these goodies that I have received from this discussion, and I will bring on. So thank you very much all. Sorry if we didn't have a real second round, but the important point was to discuss the content and the idea, and we had a lot. Thank you very much. So now let me move to a second scene now. And the second scene is about, again, more or less the same subject, but with a different configuration. In fact, I would like to introduce the speaker that we are going to have now on the second panel. And the speakers are with a little modification, but we have Madame Miriam dos Sud Almeida, a very good friend, a very close friend. She's the Minister du Développement à la base de la jeunesse et de l'emploi des jeunes de la République togolaise. Une expérience de développement à la base qui est particulièrement connue à l'intérieur des discussions à l'OCDE, parce qu'il représente une forme d'innovation avec une voix importante que les gens prennent dans la définition des stratégies futures. Thème crucial, parce que comme on voit en plusieurs parts du monde, il y a une rupture souvent du contrat social et un problème de consensus qui se manifeste de plus en plus clairement. On a dans cette discussion aussi Madame Sabine Dall'Olmo, which is Chief Executive Officer of Siemens Southern and Eastern Africa. We have Abdesamad Lamrani, which is the Director of the Minister of Solidarity, Social Development, Equality, and the Family in the Kingdom of Morocco. And we have Mr. Sebastien Frendo, which is founder and managing partner at Share. And what are we going to discuss here? Well, what are the key actors that will help to rebuild the Africa education system and how they should operate after these present phases of crisis? I am not going to repeat to you information that we all know, that there are 10, 12 million youth that will enter in the job market from now to 2050, and only 3 will find a formal job, and that agriculture and that informal sector are the main destination. These are things that we know. But what are the key actors that can intervene? That's the question. What are some of the efforts toward building people's capacity and resilience that matters? These are the questions that we would like to address now with you all together. So let me start avec Madame la ministre de Sud Almeida et lui poser la question suivante. La pandémie du Covid n'a fait que renforcer l'importance de la protection sociale au Togo, l'une des socles de sa politique de développement. Alors, est-ce que vous pourriez élaborer à propos des principales initiatives pour accompagner les jeunes dans la situation précaire dans laquelle ils se trouvent aujourd'hui, et pas simplement pour partager l'information, mais si possible aussi voir si on peut dériver de votre expérience quelques recommandations, quelques idées qu'on pourrait éventuellement appliquer aussi ailleurs.
Merci, Monsieur Pelzini. Monsieur le Président du Conseil d'administration du Centre de développement de l'OCDE, bonjour, chers panélistes. Cette initiative très appréciable, axée sur le développement du capital humain, est une belle opportunité pour partager effectivement l'expérience du Togo. Alors, j'aborderai la question sur l'angle du développement et de la transformation structurelle de notre économie depuis plusieurs années, et puis, bien entendu, sur les stratégies que cela permet de mettre en place pour contenir les conséquences de la crise sur les populations. Vous savez, depuis 2018, le Togo déploie un concept assez innovant de développement à la base qui permet, en s'appuyant sur les organisations naturelles des communautés, de lutter contre la pauvreté, de réduire les inégalités grâce à la mise en place de filets sociaux et d'infrastructures communautaires de base, d'infrastructures plutôt socio-économiques. Ce concept permet également de savoir où se trouve la pauvreté, d'être très proche des populations et de prendre en compte les besoins de protection de ces populations, tout en les impliquant et en les responsabilisant dans la mise en œuvre des solutions. Dans un pays où près de 70% de la population est jeune, à moins de 35 ans, aucune solution ou aucune action de développement ne peut être sérieuse et durable si elle s'envisage donc en dehors de la prise en compte des jeunes. Une segmentation de la population a permis d'adapter donc les solutions pour tous les groupes de jeunes, que ce soit les jeunes femmes, les jeunes diplômés, les jeunes déscolarisés, les jeunes ruraux, les jeunes vulnérables n'ayant aucune formation et les artisans et commerçants. Le programme phare, donc, mis en place par le gouvernement pour porter ces jeunesses en mal, je dirais, de repères des fois, et surtout qui fait face à la précarité due au chômage, le programme phare a été le FAYEJ, la création d'un fonds d'aide à l'initiative pour l'emploi des jeunes. Depuis 2012, le FAYEJ accompagne les jeunes porteurs d'idées et de projets de l'élaboration du plan d'affaires jusqu'au financement. Alors, un pays comme le Togo, 7 millions d'habitants, un peu plus de 7 millions d'habitants, pour vous faire une idée, c'est 56 000 km². Donc, on a 15 000 jeunes qui ont été formés, 2 200 qui ont été financés et 9 700 emplois créés. Ça veut dire qu'on ne se contente pas de mettre à disposition des jeunes le financement, mais on les accompagne, on leur donne la capacité, on les renforce. Donc, on investit vraiment dans la formation, dans l'accompagnement, le coaching, le développement personnel, et on leur donne tous les outils pour pouvoir donc réussir dans l'entrepreneuriat. D'un autre côté, on a une agence également, un programme qui est créé pour les jeunes qui sont dans le monde rural. Ça a permis en fait d'identifier des secteurs porteurs de l'agriculture et de déployer une stratégie d'accompagnement basée sur les chaînes. Donc, ça s'appelle PAIES-GSP, Programme d'aide à l'initiative d'emploi des jeunes dans les secteurs porteurs. Et donc, ce mécanisme également, qui est accompagné par la Banque africaine de développement, a permis de créer des emplois directs et des emplois indirects. Et on a autour de 30 000 emplois, environ 30 000 emplois directs, et puis 155 000 emplois indirects. Je veux dire, s'agissant de l'agriculture, c'est des saisonniers. Un autre volet pour une jeunesse qui est formée, qui a des compétences, que ce soit dans le domaine, je veux dire, qui a une formation scolaire ou artisanale ou professionnelle ou technique. Donc, on a mis en place depuis 2011 l'Agence nationale du volontariat. Cette agence de volontariat recrute des volontaires, des jeunes, des citoyens qui veulent s'engager et bien entendu les mobilise autour de certaines activités ou leur permet d'intégrer provisoirement des entreprises ou la fonction publique. Donc, nous avons différents types de volontaires. On a les volontaires nationaux de compétences, des jeunes qui ont une formation mais qui n'ont pas d'emploi et qui n'ont pas de stage. Vous savez que le monde de l'entreprise, du secteur privé de l'emploi, veut toujours des jeunes prêts à l'emploi qui ont un peu d'expérience. Donc, le volontariat permet de les intégrer, bien entendu avec un appui. Et là, ce n'est pas le secteur privé, ce n'est pas l'entreprise qui porte le coup, il ne le porte que partiellement. Et on intègre donc ces jeunes volontaires de compétences dans les entreprises, on les place auprès des entreprises avec un paiement forfaitaire d'une indemnité qui est supportée par l'État. Le volontariat prévoit également un volontariat des seniors pour accompagner les jeunes et pour partager leur expérience avec eux. Tout cela va dans le sens de la capacitation et de la formation des jeunes. On a un volontariat, c'est le volontariat d'engagement citoyen. Dans nos pays, nous avons des jeunes qui ont appris des métiers, mais qui n'ont pas la capacité et les moyens pour donc financer l'outil de travail. On parle de coiffeuses, on peut parler de forgerons, différents artisans. Et donc, ce volontariat d'engagement citoyen permet à ces jeunes, dans toutes les contrées du pays, de pouvoir se faire enrôler, de contribuer à des travaux au sein de la communauté. Et il y a un mécanisme qui leur permet d'organiser une épargne. Le jeune a par exemple un montant, disons, de 5 le transforme et qui nourrit leur métier d'origine. Et donc, ces jeunes sont également, à la fin, ils ont un montant forfaitaire qui leur est alloué.
Il semble qu'on a quelques soucis avec la connexion. Vous nous entendez, Madame la Ministre? Donc, je pense que la connexion a eu un problème. Donc, ce que je propose est qu'on passe, donc, qu'on continue notre discussion, mais qu'éventuellement, on revient. Est-ce que vous nous entendez, Madame la Ministre?
devient un économiste. Avec un capital, doter des moyens de réaliser l'activité. Et de notre côté, le volontariat international, très peu aussi aux jeunes d'aller faire des choses ailleurs, d'accompagner des programmes sociaux.
Madame la ministre, malheureusement, on vous entend avec la voix très fracturée. Donc, si vous permettez, on essaye de travailler sur la connexion avec vous et je passerai à la deuxième contribution qui est introduction du secteur privé. We have seen that in many discussions, it appears that a digital transformation requires a digital ecosystem in reality. And I guess Siemens is working in this dimension as well. Let me give you an example. Last week, Microsoft Kenya or Stanbic Kenya Foundation and the Kenyan government announced that they are creating a partnership to impart digital skills. Allô?
Oui.
Madame la ministre? No. Okay. So I was saying that... Hello? Okay. I was saying... on vous entend maintenant. On vous entend. On vous avait perdu. Donc, si vous pouvez résumer les derniers points que vous étiez en train de faire, comme ça, on est sûr d'avoir compris ce que c'était le message général. Merci. Allô? Allô? Well, okay. Let me go back there.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Je vous entends maintenant.
Oui, je crois qu'il y a une manipulation qui coupe le micro à votre niveau.
Ah oui?
Bon, là, c'est bon.
Là, parce que là, maintenant, on vous entend. Hein?
OK, très bien. Pour résumer, donc,
oui.
tout ce qui a été dit en silence, c'est que on a donc le FAIEJ, la promotion de l'entrepreneuriat, le financement, l'accompagnement, le PAEJ SP aligné sur les chaînes de valeur, le volontariat qui permet de mobiliser donc une partie de la jeunesse sur des activités à fort impact, je dirais, communautaire et social, et de leur donner également des moyens de commencer une activité génératrice de revenus. Alors, toute cette stratégie de transformation qui se lie à travers le PND 2018-2022 et la feuille de route 2020-2025 du gouvernement sont soutenues par un programme d'adaptation de l'enseignement et de développement de formation professionnelle en alternance. Donc, il est prévu de créer, pour accompagner la jeunesse dans son activité, dans sa transformation structurelle, d'adapter d'abord les curricula, de créer des organismes de formation professionnelle spécialisés, par exemple, dans l'agriculture, spécialisés dans le bâtiment, spécialisés dans l'énergie, dans les énergies renouvelables. Et certains de ces centres, Madame la Première ministre a dû les évoquer hier au cours du forum, sont déjà construits et 2 vont être encore construits. Ces programmes sont également soutenus par des programmes sociaux. Les artisans sont organisés dans des groupements professionnels et ils ont accès aujourd'hui à la couverture médicale, à la couverture santé par l'Institut d'assurance maladie qui est un organisme étatique qui fait de la couverture. Les acteurs de la chaîne de valeur du programme agricole également sont inclus ont accès au programme de couverture maladie et ces programmes sont surtout complétés par la transformation et la modernisation de l'agriculture. il y a des zones d'aménagement agricole prioritaire qui sont créées pour permettre aux jeunes d'avoir accès à la terre et de pouvoir disposer également des outils de mécanisation, des outils modernes qui pourraient être mutualisés dans ces zones-là, à l'intérieur, dans les régions, dans les zones rurales, pour accéder à la production. Derrière le financement, on a le monde agricole qui crée les conditions favorables pour développer l'agriculture. Et l'agriculture est la base du développement de nos pays, développement économique de nos pays. Et l'opportunité de la création de la zone d'échange nous conforte davantage à développer cette agriculture avec une approche intégrée qui permet de mobiliser, de renforcer la capacité des jeunes acteurs, de mettre à disposition des financements avec des mécanismes de garantie également. J'évoquerai à cet effet l'existence d'une agence nationale de garantie financière qui est créée par l'État et qui apporte donc son soutien pour les jeunes qui n'ont pas accès facile au financement bancaire et tout le reste. Et donc, l'accès au marché, l'existence d'un marché fait partie de la stratégie d'accompagnement des jeunes. Et les différents dispositifs qui sont mis en place prennent en compte donc cet accès à un marché, le marché sous-régional d'abord, mais surtout aussi une consommation nationale, une consommation locale. Le développement de la consommation locale est un des facteurs clés de la réussite donc, de notre transformation agricole au Togo. Voilà un peu comment se présente donc le paysage de cette jeunesse forte, utile de notre pays. Alors, quand on voit tous ces acteurs-là, on se demande où en sommes-nous aujourd'hui? Ces mécanismes et ces dispositifs ont permis en fait de lutter contre la crise dans la mesure où il existait déjà des cadres élargis de discussion, de contribution, de collaboration avec le gouvernement. Dès que la crise est arrivée, en dehors de la partie sanitaire qui est portée totalement par le gouvernement et le ministère de la Santé, différentes initiatives ont été mises en place. Vous connaissez le célèbre programme Novici, qui est basé sur une plateforme numérique qui a permis en un temps record d'apporter un soutien aux populations vulnérables. Au niveau des jeunes entrepreneurs, il y a une plateforme également basée sur le numérique qui a été créée pour permettre l'accès en fait au financement des fonds comment dirais-je, de trésorerie, parce que forcément les impacts économiques de la crise ont touché aussi ces populations, cette jeunesse qui commence à peine à s'émanciper, à s'épanouir.
Allô?
Oui, très bien. Alors, il y a une partie qui est… Vous avez toujours le son. Donc, un programme de filet de protection sociale a été mis en place et il y a eu comment dirais-je, un accompagnement technique, un soutien donc, des entreprises de jeunes pour les aider à redéfinir et à redresser leurs entreprises, à redéfinir les priorités, à s'adapter, à se réinventer pour pouvoir continuer donc à réaliser leurs activités. Il y a un incubateur qui a été créé, qui a contribué également beaucoup lors de cette crise, à faire face à la crise, un incubateur de jeunes autour donc, des nouvelles technologies et qui regroupe un certain nombre de jeunes talents qui réfléchissent, qui collectent des données, qui les mettent à disposition, qui innovent et qui créent des idées novatrices donc, pour que les entrepreneurs, les jeunes puissent s'adapter au nouveau monde imposé par la COVID. Les volontaires ont contribué pour eux dans la sensibilisation donc, des populations à l'intérieur bien entendu avec une contrepartie qui leur permettait également de subsister. Il a été mis en place des mécanismes d'allègement fiscaux.
Madame la ministre, ça
oui.
sont toute une série de mesures très intéressantes à suivre et ça serait très intéressant à la fin de la discussion si on pourrait les avoir par écrit, comme ça on les partagera. Mais si vous voulez bien maintenant, issu surtout des problèmes techniques qu'on a eus, si vous pourriez nous partager vos conclusions, de façon que on va continuer après, bien évidemment, au travail avec le Togo, qui est un pays très intéressant, surtout pour ses stratégies agricoles, comme vous avez dit, le plan de développement du pays et la définition des zones de transformation agricole à Kara, par exemple, et le parc agricole industriel que vous mettez en place, sont tous des exemples très intéressants, exactement parce que c'est une transformation productive dans le domaine agricole. Mais non, toute cette expérience du Togo est intéressante, mais en particulier pour notre discussion, vos conclusions, donc, quelles seraient lesquelles?
Alors, aujourd'hui, il faut savoir que l'agriculture va être la base du développement, de nos économies, de la transformation de notre jeunesse, et nous devons nous mobiliser pour accompagner à travers différents mécanismes assez cohérents en faisant intervenir de façon transversale les nouvelles technologies, l'évolution de l'agriculture, la formation et l'éducation pour pouvoir donc créer des chaînes de valeur et exploiter les différents dispositifs. Comme vous parliez tout à l'heure de la plateforme d'Adetikopé, qui va être une plateforme industrielle de transformation, qui va créer beaucoup d'emplois. Il y a également les zones agricoles aménagées prioritaires. Et on a les différents acteurs. Donc, il y a des aménagements, il y a une étude même qui est faite. Tous ces éléments, aujourd'hui, si nous voulons avancer, nous devrions mettre ensemble et travailler en synergie en nous basant sur nos forces, que sont l'agriculture, la transformation, la jeunesse, les nouvelles technologies, l'adaptation des curricula, la formation et le renforcement des capacités de la jeunesse. Nous devons aussi avoir conscience que notre jeunesse, elle n'est pas qu'une jeunesse intellectuelle qui a appris et qui sait faire des choses. Et donc, nous devrions suffisamment renforcer les capacités, les accompagner, prendre en compte les jeunes dans les zones rurales qui n'ont pas, dans un premier temps, du potentiel et les transformer progressivement à partir de nos programmes.
C'est très clair. Merci beaucoup. Passons maintenant, comme je disais, Madame Dall'Omo, because we were speaking about digital ecosystem, no? Introduction of digital may represent a leapfrogging under the condition that first, firms have a system around them that allow them to have all the services that are required in order to transform them into digital firm or firm using digital. And then obviously there is a need of an alphabetization in the labor forces. So as I was saying, Microsoft Kenya or Stabic Kenya Foundation, the Kenyan government announced that there is a partnership to impart digital skills to the 50,000 entrepreneurs to focus on individuals who have lost their jobs as a result of the COVID. So can you speak about the efforts, investment that are deployed by your company in enhancing digital skills in Africa? And of course, I am recalling the limited time for the answer, please.
Thank you, Mario. And that's a great pleasure to be on your panel. Yeah, look, I mean, the challenge really is around that we will have an incredible need for digital skills. And as we have seen, you know, specifically in COVID, water, electricity, and ICT are major components in order to make sure that societies can thrive in a time when everything is in lockdown, right? And so prior to COVID, we already had some initiatives specifically with universities around mainly mining, having digital mining incubators, you know, understanding, you know, how you can make a mining operation safe, not only with regards to the output, but also with regards to the engagement on the community. But COVID-19 COVID-19 has, changed the dimension of how fast we need to implement digital skills within the workforce significantly. And so our strive really is around finding partnerships. We had partnerships before, but we accelerated it with institutions of higher learning, for instance, with TVET colleges. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research here in South Africa, specifically around digital skills in Industry 4.0, because we see if we want to change any of the living conditions and try to apply digital technologies in order to solve the problems, then we need to educate more people on this platform. And these kind of engagements, which we have specifically around the Memorandum of Understanding, is to enable the skills being applied and developed within the TVET college, universities, and the research environment, specifically around water, electricity, food and beverage, which we see specifically a great increase in agri-tech coming forward and helping companies, but also our partnerships with the university to flourish. And I want to give you an example where we applied that within COVID-19. And if you think about that, Africa has really leapfrogged at least 5 years in comparison to where we have been last year, same time. We could really change development for the African continent. You might be aware of that the CSR, in coalition with the Solidarity Fund here in South Africa, has developed a localized ventilator, a non-invasive. We have the software which into the individual provinces through individual companies who then manufactured the components for the use. And think about, it was lockdown. We were not able to travel. We couldn't cross borders into other provinces. And it was only possible because we deployed digital technologies. And it was a 2-month program and between the development and the implementation, and it made a fantastic difference also to combat the side effects of COVID-19. But another aspect which we believe is absolutely vital, because currently, if I look into our workforce, we see that first of all, we can't fill jobs. Yeah, we have endless amount of jobs open, specifically when it comes to software development, coding. We can't find these resources currently coming from the universities. And looking at the unemployment on the African youth, we need to give answer to that, because in some of the previous discussions we also heard about the shift between urban and rural migration, and the rural population will rather stay stable in the next, say, 30 years, while the urban population will increase 3 times, and that will create an additional pressure specifically on the conditions within cities. And to make African cities then livable cities, that can only be achieved with digitalization. And therefore, we have chosen to roll out a further partnership, because as I look at, I can't find the resources in order to come into the workforce, so we have to make them ourselves. But on the second hand, it is really also around finding people who can do web applications, smaller solutions in the field of where they are active in. And therefore we have together with our software team, our solution Mendix, which we are going to roll out in Ghana, Burkina Faso and South Africa, by which we give the students the possibility to have technical tutoring, online courses, but also being then able to program small web applications by themselves for applications they have maybe in the university, be it possibly the microgrid to run the university's compound. So these are the ideas which we currently do. We have more than with 20 universities partnerships on the African continent, which we are very proud of. And to dovetail specifically also the development from the high schools, but also the feeder schools into the university and TVET college, together with our Siemens Foundation. We have a kit called the Experimento Kit, which basically starts at the last year of kindergarten and goes up to matric. And it covers the whole range of science and inquisitive science, as you call, through kits which people can use with the things they have available where they stay and at the university, or possibly as well in the school, and really try to encourage that kind of scientific thinking in schools, and that is something which we are also particularly proud of. We have, used about 200,000 kids to be exposed to our technology, and we have educated more than 3,000 teachers in order to also help youngsters to understand science in a broader curriculum at the school. So this is basically what we do in order to foster it. And if I follow the discussions which we had prior, it is also a bit about how do you then translate? And I think, Mario, you said that in the beginning. How do you translate skills into jobs? Because it's good to have somebody educated, but you also need to create the jobs to make sure that they can apply it, right? Because otherwise you, educate for unemployment. So here we have particular projects, and I maybe want to highlight two of them, which one is in Ethiopia and one is in Rwanda. In Ethiopia, it's really around an agricultural application. It's called the Fruit Box. It's in Sodo, on the southern tip of the Ethiopian border. It's a papaya farm, and there we have supported with a microgrid solution. And the microgrid solution in that context is not just something we sold to the farm, but the microgrid, the installation, the development, and the maintenance later on is part of a development program and education program for the local TVET college. So means the students are incorporated from day one into the development and the erection of the site. They will have double the amount of electricity available. One half they can sell to the farm to have some cash coming in, and the other half they can use for the community. And in parallel, they have then generated these skills so that the community will be self-sufficient and doesn't rely on people coming in from others. Another example is our e-mobility solution together with Volkswagen in Kigali, where we have educated particular young people, small, medium enterprises in Kigali to do the installation, to do the maintenance on the e-charging station so that they are not depending on anybody else. And these are great ideas, which we then also with digital skills can support remotely from South Africa or from anywhere else in the world.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that there is a dimension that is appearing. And the dimension that is appearing in different intervention is that you don't have the school that pop up, prepare skills, and then the firms that absorb this supply of labor. You have in reality the school that can provide certain skills, but then there is also a dimension of learning by doing and implementing technology that cannot be done just at school, nor it can be ensured in the private firms. So there is the need of intermediary structure that provide a connection. Now they exist in many countries. They are called polytechnics, they are called community colleges, they are called technological schools, and so on. But they seem to be indispensable, and they seem to require a cooperation between the public and the private sector. Here we had a series of examples. Now, in order to translate them into clear proposal, in order to elaborate further, or what could be the third role of the university, which is not just to prepare skill, not just to ensure education, but also to work for the local fabric, I think we should develop further a thinking and a series of proposals in this respect. Let me now move to Mr. Lamrani, parce que la décision royale de généraliser la couverture sociale à tout le Maroc à l'horizon 26 pour inclure 22 millions de bénéficiaires supplémentaires est, par définition, une décision forte et une direction de politique qu'on peut que reconnaître et louer. Donc, quel est le rôle du ministère dans cet effort? Qu'est-ce que les ministères, il faut qu'ils prennent en compte? La parole est à vous, Monsieur Lamrani.
Merci, Monsieur Pezzini, Excellence. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi, au nom de Madame Jamil Al-Moussalli, ministre de la Solidarité, du Développement social, de l'égalité et de la famille du Royaume du Maroc, de féliciter l'Union africaine et l'OCDE pour cette excellente initiative conjointe et vous remercier tous d'avoir associé notre ministère à ce dialogue de haut niveau. Pour répondre à votre question, le Maroc a en effet, depuis quelques années, lancé un vaste chantier de réforme de la protection sociale. Le projet de loi cadre sur la protection sociale, approuvé par le Conseil des ministres le 11 de ce mois, constitue une étape clé dans la mise en œuvre des orientations de Sa Majesté le roi Mohammed VI, que Dieu le glorifie, relative à la généralisation de la protection sociale au profit de tous les Marocains à l'horizon 2025. Dans le cadre de ce chantier de réforme de la protection sociale, aux côtés des départements chargés de la composante assurance sociale, à savoir le ministère de la Santé pour l'assurance maladie obligatoire et le ministère du Travail et de l'insertion professionnelle pour les régimes de retraite et l'indemnité pour perte d'emploi, le ministère du Développement social constitue le principal intervenant dans le domaine de l'assistance sociale en tant que composante non contributive de la protection sociale. L'assistance sociale regroupe un ensemble de mécanismes permettant d'apporter l'aide nécessaire aux personnes en situation difficile, de précarité ou de dépendance et de les aider dans leur réinsertion sociale. Alors, l'action du ministère du Développement social dans ce domaine se décline en 4 principaux volets. D'abord, des programmes d'aide sociale, principalement 2 programmes mis en œuvre dans le cadre du Fonds d'appui à la protection et la cohésion sociale, le programme d'aide directe aux veuves en situation de précarité ayant des enfants orphelins à charge et le programme d'aide aux personnes en situation de handicap constitué de 4 composantes, la scolarisation des enfants en situation de handicap, les aides techniques, l'appui à l'auto-emploi et la mise en place de centres d'accueil et d'orientation des personnes en situation de handicap, et puis un grand projet de régime de soutien social aux personnes en situation de handicap en application de la loi cadre sur le handicap. Ensuite, la réforme des établissements de protection sociale qui vise l'amélioration de la qualité de prise en charge des personnes en situation difficile dans ces établissements. D'abord, par la mise en conformité de ces établissements avec la nouvelle loi qui les régit, la mise en conformité, bien sûr, des infrastructures et également de la compétence des travailleurs sociaux, et bien sûr aussi la normalisation des services de prise en charge, le développement de partenariats publics-privés en vue d'améliorer les prestations de ces établissements et le renforcement du dispositif par la mise en place de nouveaux centres sociaux qui développent de nouveaux services d'assistance sociale. Ensuite, un dispositif important d'assistance sociale qui est celui de l'entraide nationale, un établissement public sous la tutelle du ministère et qui est aujourd'hui un acteur de référence en matière d'assistance sociale. Il constitue l'interface privilégiée pour assurer au sein de structures spécialisées l'accueil, l'écoute, l'orientation et l'accompagnement des populations en situation difficile. Et puis finalement, dans ces 4 volets, les dispositifs et les mesures complémentaires, les dispositifs territoriaux de protection de l'enfance pour fédérer l'action des différents acteurs dans les territoires afin d'offrir la meilleure protection aux enfants en situation difficile, un projet de dispositif d'évaluation du handicap qui va permettre d'améliorer le ciblage des personnes en situation de handicap par les programmes d'aide qui leur sont destinés, Ce dispositif contribuera à terme à l'amélioration au niveau du RSU, le registre social unique, du scoring des ménages abritant des personnes en situation de handicap. Et puis finalement, la promotion des métiers du travail social à travers d'abord la formation, donc qui est portée aujourd'hui par, principalement par l'Institut national de l'action sociale, qui est un institut d'enseignement supérieur relevant du ministère et qui développe donc un dispositif de formation initiale et un dispositif de formation en cours d'emploi. Et puis, la réglementation des métiers, donc à travers un projet de loi qui a été mis en place relatif aux travailleurs sociaux et construit autour de deux grands dispositifs, le dispositif d'accréditation et le dispositif de validation des acquis de l'expérience. Voilà rapidement donc les éléments de réponse à votre question.
Merci Claire, c'est clair. Laissez-moi demander maintenant à M. Frendo, qui vient des chaires. Donc, comment les initiatives des chaires visent à remédier à cette inadéquation qu'on voit des compétences en Afrique et à valoriser les jeunes talents dans le continent?
Merci, Mario. Maybe I will speak English. I think Keiko has some slides as well to show. So we're not as famous as Siemens, so maybe I should do a small intro about Share. So Share is a not-for-profit company with one mission, which is called Do Well, Do Good. And we run, we have two activities, education and consulting. I will not spend too much time on what we do exactly, but on consulting in Africa, we actually work on Tibet policies. We work on mini-grid, macro-grid expansion for global players. But I will spend more time on education and what we do in Africa, especially. I think if you can go to the next slide, Keiko, there's a few programs that I would like to share with you, which I think are relevant. And I try, Mario, to give you also maybe three priorities to develop human capital in Africa, at least from our perspective. So we are, let me walk you through three programs and a new one that we're going to launch actually next month. The first one is the Shared Leadership Program of Excellence that we offer today to about 300 students in top universities. It's an 18-month program. It's a program which is not only for African students, but for top students across the world. So the students that are from South Africa, Botswana, Egypt, Ethiopia, are together learning top skills from the private sector with students from all around the world, whether they are in Oxford in the UK or Yale in the US or in the top university in China and India. So that's the program that we've been launching, and that's very successful. We have another program we launched last year, which is a shorter program, which is a 6-week program that we launched during the COVID period. And we had nearly 10,000 students and young professionals from Africa who registered. And you can see on the picture, we have the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Mayam Desalegn, participated. Mario, you were also here. The CEO of EDF was also participating. And the program I want to talk about more today, and I want to acknowledge the Minister Myriam Dossou d'Almeida from Togo. Togo is a country where a lot of things are happening on the ground, a lot of implementation is happening, a lot of innovation is happening. And we launched together, we actually designed this program together, which is called the Presidential Program of Excellence in Togo, under the patronage of the President of Togo. We designed it to get together with his team. At that time, his Chief of Staff, who is now the Prime Minister, together with Minister Nachaba, who is the Secretary General of the government, we designed this program based on the 18-month program we have all over the world. And this program is simple. We want to identify the top bright students in the country. So we actually selected 20 students from roughly 1,000 applicants from top university in Togo. They follow a 2-year program with us. This program is in parallel to their academic activities. So they are following a master's degree or bachelor degree. It's a part-time program. It's free for the students. They're equipped with a laptop, digital connection. They come to our office every week. It's a blended program with e-learning. They work on a real project with startup, with the private sector. They are coached by a coach from Harvard Business School. They are former Harvard Business School. They are coached by our consultants who are all coming from top-tier consulting firms. It's a program that we launched together also with UNDP and EcoBank. Today, we had the ceremony about a few weeks ago in Togo, chaired by the Prime Minister. Those 20 students that you see on the picture are now working within the government. They're in the President's office, they're in the Prime Minister's office, they're in the key minister's office to help the government to implement the National Development Plan. And I mean, what we learned from that program is that there was a real transformation. The students that actually joined the program 18 months ago have been very transformed. So 20 now in the government, 40 more are being trained and will join the government at the end of the year. And what we liked about it, it's, as you mentioned, Mario, earlier on, it's a public-private partnership. We have the government, we have institutions like the United Nations, but we have also private sector, right? The students had internship with the private sector player, EcoBank, MSC, etc. They had exposure to rural places in Togo. They work with startups. So it's a very holistic and complementary approach. And the feedback we received so far was excellent. So that's an approach that we are actually quite keen to export to other African countries. But there's one thing that we didn't do well, and it's probably not visible on the photo. We didn't get many women. We only got 4 women who actually managed to be in the top 20 students that we selected. And that's why we are creating a dedicated program for women in Africa, which is called a Program of Excellence for Women in Africa, PIWA. The ambition is to reach 1,000 women across the continent. And so it will be very selective. We are going to launch it actually next month with one pilot country. And the idea is that we bring excellence to Africa. We bring excellence to Africa, and that's one of the characteristics of all our programs. And that's, I think, an alternative of sending bright African students to Europe or to the US to seek excellence. Here, what we do, and we found it's a lot more cheaper to bring excellence to the African continent. There is talent everywhere. And when we train our African students, we want to train them as we train them in China, in India, to the highest bar, right? There is no double standards. And of course, it's very important that the students in Togo, but elsewhere in our country where we operate, feel that they can learn from their friends in India, in China, and can be inspired to build the nation as those emerging countries. So maybe on the question, so let me try to be brief, Mario. If there are 3 things that I think are important to fix today for human capital, especially when we talk about university. I think there is a big question about TVET, technical schools, which I think should be the priority. But if we talk about university, is to fix the digital infrastructure. To fix the digital infrastructure is key. When we have our education program with our 300 students from Africa, we struggle a lot. When we did a survey recently among our African students, because of COVID time, the classes went off. 90% of the students complain about the poor quality of internet in their home country. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, which I mentioned a bit earlier on, it's not about seeking excellence abroad, it's bringing excellence in Africa. Bringing the same standard. I'm quite pleased to see the initiative that we have in Côte d'Ivoire with the Minister of Energy, who set up a joint degree between École Polytechnique in France and I think the École Polytechnique Ouafet-Boigny in Côte d'Ivoire. So it seems so, from what I understood, that the program will be delivered in Côte d'Ivoire. And if you do that, then the talent stay in the country and build the nation. So that's my second point. Bring excellence to Africa is cheaper and more effective than seeking excellence abroad. And then the third point, which I think the Minister Miriam Dossou d'Almeida has mentioned, which I think is very key, as well as the representative from Siemens, is to ensure that we build skills for job. So the students that we are training, they are trained on top corporate skills, which are the most demanding in the corporate world. They are, as I mentioned, they are coached by consultants, which are former consultants from McKinsey, BCG, etc. And myself, I'm a former BCG consultant. And it's very important that the students, in addition to the academic curriculum, are ready to work for companies. I lived in Africa for 8 years, in Sierra Leone, in Ethiopia, but also in Togo and Côte d'Ivoire. And it was very hard for us to recruit talents. It was very hard for us. And I think companies like Siemens, but also private sector, it's very hard for them to recruit talented students from universities. I think there is a need to strengthen that, to ensure that the students
are able to write a CV, they're able to go to an interview, they're able to structure themselves and be effective. So that will be my 3 points: digital infrastructure, excellence to Africa, and skills for a job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have heard many voices, and obviously a platform has to deal with listening to voices. But in reality, I tried to orient our discussion so to not just have voices, but figuring out if we could have some chorus. In other terms, if some messages can come out from our discussion and not just presenting, but also reflecting, figuring out if we can identify a narrative and some direction to go. So in this respect, it is important now to start taking some comments and ideas from those that patiently have followed all our long discussion. And my will is now to give the floor to Joshua Setipa, which is the Managing Director of United Nations Technology Bank for Least Developed Countries, because I would like to ask him, okay, we have heard programs that are established by many organizations, and I don't have any doubt that your organization itself is putting forward a specific program. But if you have a kind of a forest view, if you look at all the trees that we have heard are present, what could you derive as suggestions for direction to go in the future? Joshua.
Thank you very much, Chair. And let me also thank, through you, the OECD for inviting the Technology Bank to this important discussion. It's been a very interesting discussion since we started this afternoon. From the Technology Bank's perspective, our focus and interventions in as far as supporting countries build human capital is done from the perspective of how do we facilitate technology transfer, which in turn also supports innovation and unlocks the huge innovation potential that we know exists in Africa, which also supports countries to boost, or at least to begin to manage the increasing numbers of restless youth that are looking to create opportunities for themselves in the industry. And one of the key elements or drivers behind technology transfer and the ability to be able to use it to innovate is open trade. It is from our perspective and experience clear that open trade facilitates transfer of technology into which supports increased local production and also enhances total sector productivity. It goes without saying, therefore, that countries that are open and to trade, that are open to imports, are able to also attract higher levels of research and development. Now, this is also very important because it supports, it drives this complementary nature of trade, which supports technological change and human capital formation. We've also seen, particularly if I can just cite the example of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw last year a total collapse of global supply chains. And we immediately realized that for developing countries, or the least developed countries in particular, it was going to be either very costly for them to get hold of those critical PPEs and other COVID-19 related technologies. And the only way would be to support them to be able to manufacture and produce those products themselves. And that's when we launched the Tech Access Partnership in partnership with WHO and UNDP, where we provide technology to manufacturers and help them pivot into production of these equipment. As we speak today, we've supported companies to manufacture N95 masks. We've recently seen a spike in the demand for such assistance with the resurgence of Ebola in West Africa, in Liberia and Guinea. And we are also supporting assembly of ventilators and also diagnostic kits in Uganda and also in Senegal, and oxygen concentrators. What this also means is that even post-COVID, the recovery becomes much easier because, at least to a certain extent, not only have we transferred skills and technology, but we've also kept industry going, which is very, very important for sustainability and also recovery. We also partner with other partners, of course, within and outside the UN system, in the private sector in particular, which is why the presentation from Siemens was so interesting for us, where we are providing capacity building and technology transfer in very critical areas like biotechnology. We are also partnering, for example, on tech transfer in addressing child hearing loss in Bhutan, and which we're rolling out also to the rest of other LDCs that face a similar challenge. The key element in all these activities is that there is real skills transfer, which then also guarantees sustainability going forward, but also ensures that even once the pandemics have passed, there is a residual level of capacity that remains that is able to sustain economic activity going forward. We very much are in line with, in support with what, an agreement with what has been said in that Africa in particular, given the demographics of Africa, has a huge benefit and a huge stands to gain significantly on sustained investment in human capital. So for us, this is how we see it from a technology perspective. It's very, very important that technology flows are allowed and that governments sustain or maintain policies that provide incentives for technology transfer. And one of the things that we also do to support them is to help build the institutional capacities to be able to identify, to adapt and deploy these technologies, because that is very important for unlocking this innovation potential that we know exists in these countries. So let me stop there, Chair, in view of the time constraint. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me move to Ms. Marie-Aimée Bourré, because she's the Managing Director and Head of the Impact-Based Finance and Société Générale. And she's involved in the African Infrastructure Fellowship Program. Now, obviously, we are discussing not of infrastructure here, we are discussing human capital. So from your specific point of observation and this discussion, what you see is the perspective for a bank in contributing in this direction?
Sure, thank you very much. And maybe I will start by explaining how Africa is core to Société Générale. So it's really a continent that is core to our strategy. We are present in 19 countries where we employ 12,000 people. And every year we also recruit and train and take in apprenticeship more than 3,000 youth every year. So we're very much involved in training and helping, hopefully contributing to the training of the youth. But yes, today the vision I wanted to share with you is the importance of infrastructure and how capacity building in the teams, the government teams that design and procure those infrastructure projects is, in our opinion, absolutely strategic, because it will enable the investments in those energy and infrastructure projects. And as a result, it will trickle down in a very large number of job opportunities directly for the construction of those infrastructure, but also indirectly by enabling other industries to create jobs. And this is particularly true for digital infrastructure, as was just mentioned by Sebastian, because everything is connected now, and we can augment the impact of any project if we can properly connect it and provide combined services with the same piece of infrastructure, which is what we're trying to do behind our impact-based finance practice and mutualize infrastructure to provide more services. But coming back on what I wanted to share with you today is this initiative that we have embarked on that was taken by the French private equity fund Meridiam, together with the Global Infrastructure Hub and the World Economic Forum. It took a long time to put together, but I think it's really very relevant to this discussion, because what is really lacking is not so much funding. There are trillions of dollars available and we're looking for investments. What is lacking is the bankable projects. And it's very difficult to conceive and procure a well-structured infrastructure project, especially in Africa. So this initiative, the Africa Infrastructure Fellowship Program, is aimed at training teams, government teams that are in charge of procurement or private-public partnerships. And it's organized as a 2-month training that combine academic training and internship with private companies. And the objective is really, so the training is not done in the country, contrary to what Sebastian mentioned, but I think it's a great idea that for the future to look at that. But due to the COVID crisis, as we did the first pilot last fall in October, November, we had in fact to adapt, and we did part of this digitally, which went well. But we also have a physical part that took place in France. That's a very good idea to do it locally. And so on the first pilot program, just to share a few statistics, we had 10 fellows from 5 countries, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Gabon, Namibia, and Senegal. 50% men and 50% women, because we also want to make sure that the opportunities are for everyone. And the ambition is to train 20 to 40 fellows each year. And so this is a bit of a call for any participants who would like to join, in particular private companies, to join and provide those training. So we can help an increasing number of countries. And of course, the ambition is to cover all Africa. And we're very keen on partnerships with other organizations that work on the same way. So I'll stop here again in the interest of time.
Thank you. And the last question that we receive is from Jose Luis Artiles, which is the Director of International Strategic Partnership at University dell'Atlantico Medio in Canary Island. We don't have that much time, Jose Luis, and we understand that Canary Islands are geographically well positioned to work with West Africa, obviously. So if you just can share with us, not what you do, because we can obviously find on the web and so on, but 2 or 3 elements that comes from your experience has been helpful. How did it go? What are the major problems that you find? We don't hear you. We don't hear you.
Artiles, you are mute.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I just want to talk very shortly about the Canary Island as the potential educational hub for West Africa. Canary Island is just 50 miles away from West Africa. For example, from Gran Canaria to Dakar only takes 2 hours flight to get there, okay? So the organization that I represent in the Canary Island has a private institution, 1 high school, 1 language school, and 1 private university. And now we are talking with several universities in Senegal, for instance, to have a collaboration agreement in order for them to send students to our university in the Canary Island. So in order to do that, we are going to provide online Spanish courses to all those students for 6 months online. And then once they are able to speak some Spanish, they will come over to the Canary Island and get their degrees over here. This is the relation that we want to be with Africa from the Canary Island.
Thank you. That's very
welcome.
Okay.
Mario, you're mute.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the contributions that came to this first meeting of the platform on the issue related to human resources and in general, labor skills and labor capacities. Let me share with you a personal experience, and I want first to thank the translator that has stayed longer than we planned with us. So if you want to leave, now we want to thank you and maybe continue just in English. But the experience is my ex-wife used to teach dances and theater. And I remember that very often in the weekend, there was a course for professional dancers. And now I remember that once she came back and she said, you know, it's very strange when there is a young professor, they put in place 15 exercises over a weekend. But when you have a very old, experienced professor that studied with Martha Graham, usually they put in place only 3 exercises. And all over the weekend, they work around these 3. The more you know, the less you do and the more you study on what you do. So obviously this is the first meeting that we have on the platform, and we have 15 exercises, and we try to be like the fishermen that go out in the sea and they don't select if they want tuna fish or lobsters, they just take what come out. And obviously that's what we have done today. We have fish in a large, wide range of possibilities. But obviously that's required and that's necessary. But little by little, we have to work and to try to identify areas for cooperation, specific dimension for work, and how we can continue further. And I think that thanks to you, we can do that job and to be selective for the next step. We have heard from Stefano Manservisi and from the other colleague from UNESCO that obviously there is a space to develop further synergies. This has to do with a platform, and this has to do with the fact that around this platform, we can group different contributions. They may come from the public sector, they may come from association of citizens, they may come from the private sector. What is important is that we exploit synergies and we reduce cacophonia, where many actors pretend to invent the moon. And therefore we can join the efforts with what Stefano is proposing in this global education policy cycle and figure out also how this can be articulated at level of different regions, Africa being one, but obviously there is Latin America with its own problem, Southeast Asia, and so on. So the Pan-African initiative that we heard also from different African actors in this respect is more than well arranged in a general platform that will allow for specificity. We have also heard that we can work further on a specific proposal concerning the financing stream that has to touch education. And this proposal, we will have to work in the days to come in order to transform it in something that can be, we heard bankable, no, in this case, G20able, and therefore we can put on the table of the discussion that will take place soon as the T20 team that Stefano is coordinating and chairing will have to make on the table some specific proposal, and we can contribute with blogs, with talks to figure out how to make land this proposal appropriately. A second point that we have heard is that when it comes to education, we cannot separate the discussion from the major, one of the major objectives that Denis Kabikini is always recalling to us, which is the productive transformation of Africa. Therefore, it's not a discussion in itself only, is related to that general objective. And for this to be effective, we need obviously to identify and clearly the productive transformation strategies of countries, figuring out a method to discuss among countries their strategies that can be the same for all countries, but unique, and as such to establish a kind of peer dialogue among countries on the strategies to be undertaken. Here, the center can help with the experience of Annalisa on productive transformation policy reviews. But we need also, in these policy reviews, to have a bigger focus on technical skills and how the technical skills can be produced with community colleges, polytechnics, laboratories for industries, all a series of tools that have been experimented in many countries, and there is not a one solution only, but at least we need to compare, and that work can be done. Last but not least, in this work on the labor market, we have constantly to report in our African Development Dynamic Report, which is a platform in reality, where we involve many researchers, government, and Dennis Kabikini will not contradict me. I think this is an exceptional tool that we have built together, and the African Union is leading. And obviously, Arthur Minsad will take note of these points in our discussion. A final dimension is related to the social protection. Social protection is a very important theme, but it goes far beyond only ensuring social traditional policy. It has to deal on mechanisms through which we can provide voice to the people that more and more occupy streets because they want to count in the decision of the strategy for their country, but also the policy for their family. In this respect, NEPAD is obviously a crucial partner together with the commissioner of the African Commission, and we will have to further design the role of regional communities, the tools to be used, and the method of participation of people in the design on social protection strategies. That's why the experience of Togo, I think, and the experience that Almeida, the Minister Almeida has reported to us is so crucial. So Développement à la base is not the only example that we have found, but it's a crucial example in years in which we have seen in many developing countries the social contract going broken. Things to Chile, just to speak about countries that are not in Africa, but things to Tunisia with the Arab Spring. So in that context, it's obvious that we need a policy making that is done differently with the voice of people, and therefore these experiences will be important. I cannot go further because I have abused too much of your attention, but I think it was a very important first 15 exercise training experience, and now we have also direction to go further and more precisely. And I can't but thank extremely all the work that we have done with the African Commission, and in particular with our friends Gabikini, and also with Commissioner Victor Harrison that terminated his mandate, but has been an incredible partner. And now we will work with Commissioner Muchanga and Al-Fadil to continue this exceptional experience. Thank you very much. Have a nice lunch. See you soon. Bye.